Good evening. As a preliminary matter to the rate hearing, I would ask the board to formalize the appointment of Ken Moore as the hearing officer.
Board Member Jeff Ryan, I move.
Mary Gonzalez, board member, I second.
All right, then roll call. Groneman, should I come back? Okay, Haley. Mylan,
Here.
Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Bryant, Gonzalez,
Aye.
Groneman.
Council, you've been muted for a few seconds for first speaks.
Would you leave it on, Board Member Groneman, if you could leave it unmute, count to 2 and then answer. Okay, well, I believe we do have 4 votes, so that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Ken Moore. I am the hearing officer for this public hearing. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive public comment on proposed electric and water revenue changes and also the electric rate changes proposed by staff to be later considered by the BPU board. The board will consider these proposed changes at a later meeting, and so no formal action will be taken tonight at this public hearing. Anyone who wants to speak at this public hearing who's in person should sign up. There's a sign up sheet there and your names will be called and you will be given one opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. Those who are participating via Zoom can enter into a chat and give their name and address, and then they will be taking that order. Ask that first that everyone turn off your cell phone or put it on silent so that it doesn't interrupt any of the speakers. The order of business tonight will be the BPU will make a presentation. After that presentation, there will be a question and answer period. You can submit a written question which will be answered by BPU staff. After the question and answer period, there will be again the opportunity for public comment, and you'll come up and give your comments. That's an opportunity for you to make comments, but not ask questions. The Q&A portion is prior to the public comment portion. Ms. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Moore. My name's Kathy Peters, and I'm representing the BPU in this matter.
Have there been any petitions for intervention?
Yes, as Randy Auding will testify in a minute, petitions for intervention were timely filed on behalf of the Sierra Club representing some BPU customers.
Thank you. And is the interveners introduce himself? Thank you both. Okay, this time I'd like to turn this over to Mr. David Melhoff on behalf of BPU.
Thank you. As a reminder that obviously you're aware the hearing tonight and tomorrow is also on Zoom. And so people will be able to participate remotely as well as here within our board meeting. And once the rate hearings are all over, about a day or so later, then the video will be also available on their website, like all our board meetings are and so forth. So you can look at those and play those back at your leisure. Reminder, these mics are really very sensitive, more sensitive than I realized. And so we could be careful with your discussions because it picks up a lot of things and doesn't want to interfere with either the recording or people back home listening in. There will be a place over here if you'd like to sign up to speak. take your time and go up there and sign up. There's a number of sheets there to sign up to speak. And then also in the chat via Zoom, you would raise your hand like you normally would do that you would like to speak. Then there'll be a question and answer session after the presentation before the public comments to answer any questions. Put questions on cards or in the chat if attending via Zoom. So those cards are back there and some pens. And there'll be a time when, you get up at your leisure. If you want to ask a question, you may want to wait a little bit to get through some of the presentations. And then we'll have a little bit of downtime as I gather all the questions before we get into answering those for you. Please don't interrupt the speakers or talk during the presentations. As I said, there will be an opportunity for questions and comments after the presentation. We have some board members present. We have Rose Mulvaney Henry, our current board president, and we have Jeff Bryant, and we also have Mary Gonzalez. Bob Mylan is joining us via Zoom, and I believe also Tom Groneman is joining us remotely, and David Haley. So speaking on behalf of BPU, and we do have a couple of customer service representatives here. This is not a place to bring up customer service issues. This is really talking about the rate hearing. But if you have a customer question or something like that, we do have a couple of customer service representatives, Janetta Hinson and Gabby Freeman, and they can answer those for you or at least take your information and talk to you about it a little bit later. Speaking tonight on behalf of the BPU, Bill Johnson, Randy Otting, Lori Austin, Steve Green, Darren McNew, Glenn Brendel, Andrew Ferris, Anna White, and Craig Brown. Now I'm going to turn things over to the attorney for BPU, Ms. Kathy Peters.
Thank you very much. I'm going to tell you something that you've heard a couple of times already, but I'll just reiterate it. This is a public hearing, and the purpose of the hearing is to determine the expected costs and subsequent revenue requirements of the electric and water utilities, and then consider whether any revenue adjustments are needed in order to pay for those costs, and finally to determine how the rate should be allocated to the different customer classes. There are also some proposed changes to the BPU rate manual. The BPU staff and the consultants are going to speak about these things this evening. And this will start with these introductions that we're doing, explanations. There will be a few things done tonight that won't happen tomorrow morning, but we're basically doing the same presentation twice so that people have an opportunity to come in when they're not at work. And the things that we're doing this evening is Mr. Otting and I are going to have the evidence that the 90 days notice of the hearing was provided. And also the hearing officer is going to swear in all of the BPU folks who are going to testify during this. As Mr. Melhoff and as Mr. Moore said, following the presentation, there's the opportunity for questions. We want questions to be written, and then Mr. Melhoff will take a look at those and we'll make sure that the correct BPU representative answers them. So we'll take a short break after the presentation before those questions are answered, and then we'll have the opportunity for public comment. When all of that is over, we'll go home and we'll start all over again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and do the same thing. BPU will have what we call a technical portion of the hearing after tomorrow's public portion is over. That's where we will formally offer into evidence some of the things like our cost of service study, the PowerPoint presentations from this evening, pre-file testimony, and the like. There are some fact sheets back on the table by the sign-in sheet, and each of those will also be offered in as exhibits. The presentation is going to take about an hour, maybe a bit longer. So we want people to be ready to listen as we explain the cost requirements, revenue requirements, and then what that means for adjustments to your rates and how to allocate across the classes. So after all of this is done this evening, as I said, we'll go home. Tomorrow we'll start all over with a repeat of this session. Then we'll have the technical portion. After BPU finishes its technical portion, the Sierra Club will have an opportunity to provide its technical evidence. They, like BPU, had pre-filed testimony, and then they, like BPU, will have a PowerPoint presentation. And there will be an opportunity for questions after that. When all of that is over, we'll ask the hearing officer to continue the hearing until this is all presented to the board. The board will not make a decision until everything is in front of them. That's the reason for the hearing. We want them to hear the evidence and hear the public comments. At the present time, we expect this will go to the board at its July 5th meeting, and that meeting starts at 6. Believe that is all I had to say in the way of an explanation. So, Mr. Moore, if we could have you swear in all of the BPU and Black and Veatch and 1898 and Company personnel, and those are our two consulting engineering firms. If you could swear all of them in, then we will be ready to start our presentation. Yes, please. And I think I have written down the names, but I will be happy to do that if you'd like.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Mr. Otting, if you could come forward. This is one of the things we're just doing one time, along with that swearing in. Mr. Otting and I will be offering the evidence that the 90 days notice was published in the Kansas City Star. Come on over. Please state your name and your business address.
Randy Otting, 540 Minnesota Avenue, Kansas City, Kansas, 66101.
What is your occupation?
I am the Director of Accounting for the Kansas City Board of Public Utilities.
What are your responsibilities relating to the current electric and water rate hearing relating to the publication of notice and dissemination of information to the public?
My primary responsibility is coordinating the information related to the rate hearing, ensuring timelines are met, including the publication and notice of hearing are filed timely, and making sure that the information is disseminated to the parties within the BPU.
Please list the dates and places of publication of notice of public hearing.
We filed March 10th, 2023 in the Kansas City Star and March 16th in the Wyandotte Echo. The notice of publication in the Star, like I mentioned, was March 10th, which provided the 90-day notice provided by the statute and met that requirement. The document presented will be exhibit BPU-1.
And Mr. Moore, I offer exhibit BPU-1 into evidence. I'll bring it over in just a minute.
Thank you. Received.
Were any petitions for intervention filed?
Yes, I received a petition for intervention from the Sierra Club on March 24th, 2023. Copies of our rate study were provided them and emailed to the representative on March 21st, 2023.
Did you notify past interveners?
Yes, on March 9th, 2023, a copy of the public notice was emailed to past intervener representatives, along with the deadline dates to file a petition to intervene. In addition, copies of our rate studies were emailed to their representatives on March 21st, 2023. On April 30th, 2023, in addition, we had a detailed presentation for our wholesale water customers and their representatives with question and answer session following the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otting. Affidavit of publication of the hearing notice.
Well, based upon BPU Exhibit 1 and the testimony of Mr. Otting, I find that notice has been proper and timely given for this hearing, and we may proceed.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm just going to let you know any other exhibits we have, we're going to wait until tomorrow when we finish our public portion to introduce all of them. So now I'm going to turn it over to the BPU for the presentation, which will be a PowerPoint presentation. Lori, are you our first speaker? No, Bill Johnson is our first speaker, of course. And if you all can look up there on the board, you will see the PowerPoint as he gives this talk.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to first begin by welcoming our board of directors and also thanking everybody else in the room for attending here today. Very much appreciate your attendance here and being a witness to what's all involved in this rate hearing process. It's very important for us to clearly make the case for what we're asking or requesting our board to do and why. I know it's never an easy thing to. I'm kind of waiting on. Okay. I know it's never an easy thing to ask our community, ask our board to increase rates and have our community be satisfied with that. However, I do want to say that not only myself, but staff is very committed towards keeping our rates as low as possible. We work very hard to increase our communication to all of our citizens and provide them with the information on how to better manage their energy and water usage. In fact, we provide additional information on how to get them to reduce their energy and water usage. In a few minutes, part of our staff will be coming up to make presentations today and will be available later for questions. And hopefully we'll be able to provide all the answers as already stated. Also, what's been stated is this will be a pretty lengthy presentation tonight. So I will ask for you to be patient, allow us to get through that. Staff members will be making technical presentations to this hearing and the information, not only on the rate increases, but also what we plan to do with what we're requesting with the additional revenue that'll be generated. I will primarily focus on historical trends, our efforts to control costs at this utility, and other things that have had a negative impact on our liquidity. And then staff will then follow up with the remainder presentations on the whole planning process, the proposed rates that we're requesting. And also at the conclusion, we will again answer questions and be there to assist in answering anything that may come up. We do have the technical support here along with staff from Black and Veatch and also 1889, which is formerly Burns and McDonnell engineering firms. These are two internationally known engineering firms that have strong reputations for doing this type of work, and they did help us with our cost of service and rate design. I would now like to turn to our historical trends and talk about cash reserves and the journey we've had with that. Our cash on hand has recently been trending downward. This downward trend can be directly attributed to the increasing challenges associated with operating a utility like ours. The price of material services have steadily gone up, while the base rates have remained constant over the last few years. For some time, we've struggled to maintain a goal of 60 days of operating cash. Our rating agencies, and we do visit with them on an annual basis, our rating agencies continue to advise us to build our cash reserves to over 120 days. Not only for building cash, but also to protect our credit rating and also protect us against any unforeseen things that may come up unexpectedly. Recently, we've been running somewhere between 58 and 71 days in the calendar year 2023. This still puts us below our target levels for what we want to achieve with our liquidity. Reducing electric consumption has contributed to this. Most, if not all of our customer classes on the electric side, usage is down for the year. Electric industrial customer usage is down roughly 10%. Commercial is down by about 3%, and residential is down roughly 3%. Looking at the water usage, taking into account all of the same customer classes over the last 5 years, water has been somewhat more stable. However, on the wholesale side, we are starting to lose some of our customers there. In fact, City of Bonnet Springs are in the process of building a water treatment facility, and they'll be furnishing water to their own customer base. So that would be revenue that we will lose in the near future. The local economy has also been challenging for us over over the recent years. We are, in addition to that, we're a weather-driven utility, meaning there are certain times throughout the year where we bring in the most of our revenue, and we try to satisfy all of our other operating requirements throughout the year based on those peak periods where our revenue do peak. I think it's important to also understand that, despite some of the economic success we've had, I think there's a sense that we're growing in revenue, especially when you look at some of the economic development successes we've had out west. But in reality, what we basically have seen is a shift in population, a shift in businesses moving from the eastern part of our community to the western part of our community. And the net result of that has been very low economic growth for our community. I'll move on to another thing that we are very challenging for our utility, and that is the national pandemic we just witnessed. So beginning on March 16, 2020, our utility was forced to work through an unforeseen national pandemic that caused the ripple effects through many of the business and financial markets in this country, but also around the world. The concerns created by COVID caused several drastic steps that we had to undertake in terms of protecting our workforce, protecting our customers, and protecting our utility operations. This uncertainty created the World Health community to cause us to move towards issuing multiple moratoriums over the course of about 18 months. So again, this started for us in March of 2020. By May of 2020, our revenues had already dropped about 16% of what we were collecting. This caused us to quickly have to start slashing spending in order to make up the loss of revenue. And those operating expenses were slashed to the tune of around 21%. Then we went the extra step of freezing all non-essential capital spending to offset that drop in revenue as well. We also felt it was important to support the community as best we can. So we offered extended payment arrangements, and there's a number of our customers that took advantage of that. Moved those payment arrangements from 6 months to 12 months. We suspended late payment fees. We worked continuously with the state of Kansas on trying to implement the CURA program to help people with the state of Kansas providing utility and rent assistance for all people in our community that would apply. Sadly, to date, we have not entirely recovered from testing. Sorry about the technical issues. Testing. We're still dealing with the after effects from this pandemic. Another thing that we've had to work our way through is over the last couple of years, we've tried to keep our elected officials and our community abreast of all the changes in the regional energy markets and the volatility that we had to work our way through with the rapid changing in base generation throughout the markets. You want me to continue on, or okay? Weather and gas prices have played a role in creating higher energy prices. If you look at the gas prices that we all consume at the pumps, we all look at heating, gas prices from other utilities. All of these things have played a factor in driving energy prices beyond what we've seen in a number of years. Our message was that we continue to communicate our benefit of having a mixed generation portfolio, because that has served us well And it's helped us to hedge against some of the other prices and better protect not only our community, but also continue to offer the cheapest prices we could to the community that we serve. Also, this also benefited us through some of the cold weather events and other things that other states had. So it also improved reliability of services that we offered by having the mixed generation resources that we do have. Now, having said that, I would say that we are currently conducting a future generation study to help guide us through the next several years, and hopefully we'll make prudent decisions about what our next generation needs to look like, how soon we will get there, and any final determinations of how that's going to benefit not only the utility, but also the community that we serve. Southwest Power Pool is also suggesting that utilities take a slower approach to replacing coal and gas resources of generation. They manage markets, they manage utilities across most of the Midwest and Rocky Mountain regions. And they're seeing the challenges of utilities that are moving too fast and are just providing caution to all of us about how fast we replace traditional base load generation. So we're already conscious of that, but we are still moving forward with our future generation plans. Supply chain inflation increases have also served a role. So since 2021, we've been experiencing severe shortages in supplies and also materials, and also the price increases that have driven up the cost of us doing business. Some of these inflationary numbers are the highest that this country has faced in over the last 40 years. The supply chain disruption has caused prices to skyrocket. National economies attribute some of this to not only the pandemic, but also the Russian invasion of Ukraine and other things that are going on throughout the world economy. We'll be presenting data later in the presentation to show how inflation is creating havoc in the cost for us to do business. It's certainly costing us more to provide the same service. And is forcing the public sometimes they have to pay higher prices in all sectors, not just for utility rates, but in everything we do, all the consumer, all of the things that we buy, consumer products that we buy, whether it's grocery stores, whether it's everything else. Inflation is having an impact on everything we do. So from 2018 to 2022, we reduced our budget by $42 million. Part of that has come through staff reductions. So about 10% of our workforce have been reduced since 2018. We continue to refine our performance management program to further drive productivity and increase the effectiveness of what we do, and also control the cost that we're passing on to you as citizens. At the same time, we're looking at our contracting services, and we're finding the need to better manage what we do there. And we have made inroads in better controlling those costs as well. We've adopted a priority budgeting system sometime back, and that continues to improve over time with how we target and what we spend our dollars on. And we have tools in place to better forecast not only what our future generation is, but how does that tie back to expenses or cash reserves and protecting that, so that we are doing all that we can to manage this utility as efficiently as we possibly can. One thing that I would say is we've been very fortunate that we haven't had any major equipment failures right in the midst of all. Has forced us to continue to delay some of our major construction projects. Now, we've deferred a lot of upgrades on our distribution systems, both electric and water. However, we work very hard to try to maintain an acceptable level of reliability and service that we provide to the community. This, of course, is getting harder and harder for us to maintain with the current rates that we're currently operating under. Some of our water systems, and I think, you probably have heard some of this through our previous board presentations. We have water mains out there that's 75 to 90 years old. That's going to take quite some time to replace. But we do have plans in place to where we are aggressively going on after that with the amount of capital dollars we can dedicate to that. We have substation equipment that's at or above 50 years of age. And we're trying to make sure that infrastructure don't get us any further, that present any more problems for us. It's no more than necessary. Want to get a little bit more into our historical rate adjustments. And what I've talked about us operating through all of the issues I've previously talked about under the current rates. So we haven't had a rate increase on the electric side since 2018. You got to go back to 2013 since we've had an increase on the water side. So that's 10 years and 5 years. We completed a cost of service study in 2020 and was thinking about presenting that to our board. We didn't go forward with that because of the pandemic. We held off. Now here we are 3 years later. I'm standing here trying to make the case to present a rate adjustment to the public now. But that's 10 years of maintaining the operations that we have on the water side without any adjustments, despite all the things that I've just went through. That's 5 years on the electric side. Other utilities have not gone this long. We have been very careful to continue to work on the cost side of our budget to reduce and manage our operations as efficiently as we can. But now we're coming back requesting additional revenue to continue to move forward with offering the services that we do. The other thing that I would say is we've also, on a positive note, have continued to provide utility assistance to all of our customers in this community. Our utility assistance programs date back over several decades. Our utility assistance program since 2019 has paid out over $2.3 million in direct utility assistance programs through both utility assistance and the hardship programs that we offer. We continue to work with we have worked with Unified Government, and we continue to work with United Way. And during COVID, we found another $600,000 that went directly into the utility assistance program that was part of the federal and state COVID relief funds provided to the Unified Government. In addition to offering those services, we continue to work with the customers on the energy efficiency side and also at one time offered energy audits and took advantage of financing weatherization programs and as a way of helping people to better weatherize their homes and reduce their bills and improve how well their homes are performing, and then also help them with lower utility bills. I'd like to thank staff for all of their hard work and coming and helping me get through all of this. It has been a challenge for all of us, but I would say the staff has worked very well and very hard. And we all live in the community. We all work in the community. We are all dedicated to serving this community. And I'd like to continue to thank them for all their hard work. As a reminder, the mission of our utility is to focus on the needs of our customers, improve the quality of lives of our community, and promote safe, reliable, and sustainable utilities. I think we take that to heart, and I think we will continue with that message and continue to move down that path of providing that level of service to our community. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Randy Odding, Director of Accounting, and he'll move into other parts of our rate hearing testimony tonight.
Good evening. Quickly, I'm just going to go over our process and sort of how we got to where we are today. And it all started basically about a year and a half ago. Every 3 to 5 years, we initiate a formal process to go out and look at our rates, look at our rate designs and see if they're doing what they're intended to do. So we've, as part of that process, we've hired our consultants, which has been mentioned earlier, Black and Veatch for the water side and 1898 for the electric side. Both these firms have done extensive research, throughout the country and have lots of experience doing these types of these studies and so forth. We've done, as was briefly mentioned, we've done several rate hearings. We've done rate studies every 3 to 5 years. We did one in 2010, 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2023. We had adjustments to our rates in 2010, 2016, and what we're asking for, what we're proposing in 2023. There's 3 basic components to the rate studies. Our consultants will go over this in more detail later in their presentations. There's a revenue requirement piece. There's an allocation of cost piece where we allocate the cost amongst classes. And then there's a rate design piece that we allocate those costs and they're designed in rates to recover to the appropriate rate classes. As mentioned earlier, we have a 90-day notice period, allows the public an opportunity to review, and also allows an intervention period for interveners to formally review the request, review the proposal, and see, ask questions and so forth. And it also allows for a formal review for the public to review the requests and so forth. Next slide. That brings us to today. We have 2 hearings scheduled, one for today and one for tomorrow morning. Transcripts will be available after the hearing for the public to review and also for the board to review. Board will make a decision later, at a later date, as indicated early in the presentation. Next slide. So the purpose of the rate hearing tonight, it's really for us to give a formal presentation to the public, for you to review it, and for you to have an opportunity to give, answer questions, provide questions, and us to provide answers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Austin, the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Randy. Lori Austin, Chief Financial Officer for the Board of Public Utilities. So the first thing that we set out in doing in our cost of service studies are determining what our goals are for the BPU. So we look at being able to adjust our rates so that we recover the proper revenue from the customers in those classes that share that cost of service. We also look at our rate designs in order to determine and match customer profiles, and also if we've had some requests from some of our customers in their rate designs, we look at that. So you'll see that within the rate study. Meeting financial policy targets are a key component of our goals, and 2 main metrics that we'll be talking about is our debt service coverage, so our ability to pay back our debt, and also liquidity. And Bill spoke to that a little bit. So what is our days of cash on hand? And then lastly, it's to be able to maintain our current credit rating and retain the ability to issue debt affordably. So that's important for us. And the studies have helped us to accomplish all of those goals. Next slide. So our planning process is we start with our annual budget, and that annual budget is driven by and developed using long-term strategic plans, as well as our electric and water master plans. We prepare a 5-year capital budget improvement plan that's embedded within the annual budget. And then we present to our board of directors after lengthy review with management and staff. We do several different workshops to go over key components of the budget. And then the board here's our final budget presentation in December before the next fiscal year. So some of the key drivers for our rate increase, and this is after looking at our revenue requirements and our rate design. So like I said, our financial policy metrics drive our need for rate adjustments. So our target number one is our cash operating reserve of 120 days of operating and maintenance expenses for the electric side, and 100 days of operating and maintenance expenses on the water side. The second target is our debt service coverage. So we target 1.6 times without including pilot revenue. And that means we need $1.60 for every dollar of debt that we have. Our annual debt service coverage with the inclusion of pilot is 2 times the debt coverage. Some additional key drivers, and you'll hear that throughout our presentation. So inflation costs have put pressures on our financial metrics in both our operating expenses and our capital, as that includes a lot of our material cost. We've seen large increases in our cost and also delivery delays, long lead times in a lot of our material. So maintaining our financial metrics. So electric days of cash. If we didn't increase rates, we would not be able to meet our target of 120 days throughout the study period. With the increase, we're able to meet our targets within 2025. So we're not building it right away to meet that goal, but we're building it over time. On the electric debt service coverage, without the increase, we would drop below our target level of 1.6 times by 2024. And then with the increase, we'd be able to meet our target by 2024. On the water side, water would not meet its target of 1.6 times until 2024 with the increase. One thing that we're doing is we have capacity charges that we're required to make. And right now we have a portion of it in our base rate, and then a portion of it is in the ERC charge, our energy rate component charge. So we would, we have proposed to move $2 million of the capacity charge out of the ERC and into the base rate. And then the last target we have is establishing an ERC reserve. That'll be funded gradually through the ERC charge. And so that is to address volatility that we've seen within our fuel and purchase power cost. So our assumptions used in developing the revenue. So we look at our sales and our billing units. This is for the electric side. So our forecast, we use the 2023 forecast, which is our current year. For our sales, we're looking at our 2022, basically where we ended up the year in 2022, and looking at those projections. The table below demonstrates what we anticipate our growth or negative growth in each of those customer classes. So as you can see, there's just not much movement from year to year, and some of our customer groups are showing negative growth in some of those years. We look at our operating and maintenance expenses, our forecast. So our forecast is based on the 2023 budget. And then we have made some allowances for inflation. And this is similar on both the electric and water side. The table below represents our projection and what those inflationary percentages are in each of our operating and maintenance categories. So we have personnel costs, services, materials and supplies, and there are other operating expenses. and then employer healthcare, as well as we have a retiree healthcare. So our measurement looks at our 23 budget, and then it's escalated from there. We feel like our escalations are pretty conservative over the life or over the time period of doing our study. Next slide looks at our expense side, our operating expense forecast. Now, this doesn't include fuel and purchase power, as that has a separate mechanism to it. So over 2023 to 2027, the increase in overall of our O&M expenses is less than $1 million. So that's less than 1% over a 5-year period. The top line there, the non-ERC capacity purchase, that's moving that $2 million into the base rate. Our assumptions that we're using for our capital improvement plan and financing plan. So our baseline is also our 2023 budget. So it's a 5-year plan looking at 2023 to 2027. We did identify a bond issue to be issued at the later this year, $50 million for electric projects, mostly in the transmission and distribution area. The water side has a water supply loan that they are looking to issue at the end or in 2024, about $9.5 million. And then we have been fortunate enough to be able to get some federal grants for our water projects. We received about $10 million for our water main replacement program, and about $4 million for electric generator project out at our treatment plant. So all of our other capital projects will be financed with our annual operating revenues. So, being able to provide some debt for some of these projects allows us to finance those long-lived assets. Some of those assets are, 30, 40, 50 years in life, and being able to spread that debt out over time. We don't have to, pay cash all up front to pay for those right away. So on the electric capital plan, so it's a 5-year capital plan, is approximately $180 million in capital spending. So some of our major spending categories are identified below. Some of the bigger ones are substations, about $20 million. Our overhead distribution is about $52 million, and then our power plants is about $29 million. So these are projects that are to maintain, our existing assets and equipment. It's also in order to build new assets that are required, as well as rebuilding existing assets that we have in place. This next slide takes a look at our, on the electric side, it looks at our outstanding debt. So this is, over about a 23-year period, what our debt looks like. So the idea is, as you see, as we get out into years, our debt starts falling off. But in order, if we do issue debt, usually it's 25 or 30-year debt, we lay that debt over that time period and minimize the overall impact of the debt service over time. So our forecast, this is without a rate adjustment. So this schedule looks at about midway through the page, it looks at our days of operating and maintenance reserve. So our target going into our 23 is 120 days. As you can see, with no adjustment, we don't meet our target within the study period all the way through 2027. And in fact, in 2020, after 2025, we really dropped quite a bit. If at the bottom of the graph there, or the table there, our target of debt coverage is 1.6 times. So we do maintain our debt coverage level, meet our debt coverage level through 2023, but then after that we drop below our targets. This next slide looks at with the rate adjustment, the days of O&M reserve. We meet our target by 2025. So as I stated earlier, we kind of build towards it. We're not planning on trying to meet that target right away. So it takes a couple years to build to that level. And then our debt coverage, we would bring our debt coverage up into beginning in 23 with the rate increase, and then be able to maintain above our 1.60 during the study period. On the water side of our sales and billing units, so our water volumes are based on historical and based on our usage per account. So we don't see our sales volume projected to increase very much over the life of the study. So it's a little more than 1/3% that we see in usage over the life of the study. We do have wholesale sales. We are anticipating wholesale sales to drop in 2025. And that's a result of the city of Bonner Springs starting up their system in 2025. On the O&M side, on the water, that breaks down each of the categories there. Both production and transmission and distribution show the highest cost increases. Our production being up due to cost of chemicals, and our T&D being up in the cost of materials and pipe in the ground. On looking at our individual costs for O&M, so our basis is our 2023 budget, and then this is the same table that we use on the electric side. So it's projecting what our escalation factors are. So basically they're the same that we've done with the biggest, everything's above around 2% except our other operating expenses. On the water's capital program, so water also has a 5-year capital program. So their anticipated expenditures are $202 million in capital spending. Some of their main categories there are distribution, about $50 million, and that's replacing mains and lines. Transmission and storage is another $50 million. So that's, some of the elevated tanks or pump stations, the work that's done associated with that. And then services and water production are two of the other areas on the water side. So as it is with the electric, our projects are there to maintain existing assets and the equipment, and then install our new assets as needed or rebuild existing assets. This is a look at water's outstanding debt. As I stated, it's good for us to have the ability to lay debt over time. Water has a pretty good drop in debt as it comes out of really 2023, but also after 2028. So that is good for us, and it's dropped significantly in the next 5 to 7 years. So this is looking at our metrics with no rate adjustment. And so our target O&M reserve, our target days are 100 days for the water side. Without the increase, would be okay into 2023, but after 2023, we would not meet our targets. And in fact, we would be in a pretty negative state going into 26 and 27. And with our rate increase, our days of O&M reserve, as we went into 24, we would still be above our target of 100 days, be able to reach our targets to 128 days by 2027. And then on our debt coverage, we would reach our debt coverage levels in 2024 and be able to maintain it throughout the study period. So why is this necessary? So just recap, it's to maintain our debt service coverage, allow us to borrow with bonds and loans so that we can pay for our long-lived assets. Be able to provide funding for our 5-year capital plan and maintain and build our assets. Be able to meet our financial targets throughout the study period. So our proposal of 2.5% electric increase for 2023 and 24. And just to give you an idea what a 2.5% increase means to the electric side is generates about 3.7 million in revenue per year. On the water side, our proposal is 6% water increase for 23, 24, and 25. And a 6% water increase generates approximately about 2.6 million in revenue per year. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Randy.
Thanks, Lori. I'm going to go into more detail on the proposal Lori presented there at her final slide. Quickly, this is a repeat of what's been discussed before. This is just a graphical look at our sales the last 5 years. We see that dip in 2020 and we've kind of come out of it. This is on the electric side. We still haven't fully recovered from where we were at in 2018. As Bill mentioned earlier at the beginning, our industrial sales are approximately about 10% lower than they were in 2018 currently. Next slide. Water sales are much more consistent and don't seem to fluctuate as much as we have on the electric side. As you can see, they're pretty stable graphically here. Sales have pretty much recovered from where we were in 2018. We did see that same kind of dip in 2020, but overall, we're pretty much kind of back to where we were from 2018 levels. Looking back at our last rate hearing from the electric side, we had a rate adjustment in 2018. It was approved in 2016. It was a 2-year rate adjustment for 2017 and 2018. At that time, we had some rate design changes as well. We implemented a commercial all-electric rate for our commercial customers who had all-electric facilities. We adjusted what we call our summer period to June, July, August, and September. Prior to that, it was May, June, July, and August. So we shifted it 1 month. We increased our fixed charges at that point in time to kind of align ourselves with what was going on around the nation and kind of sticking with the trend of ensuring that our customer charges are set where they need to be. We implemented a high load rate design for customers who have these are primarily industrial customers that have high load factors. And we implemented an outdoor lighting rate design for customers who have evening lightings and so forth. So what's being proposed in this proposal is we're on the residential side. We currently have 2 rate classes, 101 and a 100 and a 101 rate, we call it. We're proposing merging those 2 classes together. Essentially, it'll provide a discount for customers in the winter period, which we call the winter period, anything that's not summer. So it's essentially our fall, winter, and spring periods. The rates will be cheaper if you get out over the 1,000 kilowatt hour usage monthly. And it really simplifies the billing for our billing personnel, people, and the verification process that is that we have to go through on some of those customers. We're also looking at implementing a green rider. This is for our commercial industrial customers. Some of our CNI customers have an interest in procuring green energy. So this will allow them to meet their corporate goals that they may have or corporate responsibilities, and they will procure that energy and we will manage that transaction here for them. Next slide. In addition, the customer charge, we're going to continue to focus on increasing our fixed billing charge units that are related to the customer charge. This is following a national trend. The customer charge recovers costs related to meters, billing, postage, customer service, infrastructure, anything that connects the water, electric and water systems to the house. We're proposing establishing an ERC reserve and modifying the language in the ERC rider that will allow us to recover dollars to establish that ERC reserve. So specifically, as mentioned earlier, we're proposing a 2.5% in 23, a 2.5% in 24 on the electric side. The rates vary by rate class. They range from 1.7 to 3.7%. And this is dictated by the cost of service allocation that's given through the study. The impact to the bill in our winter periods, we're estimating a $4 increase in the bill, going from $1.14 to $1.18. That's in the non-summer periods. And in the summer periods, we are looking at $195 to $205, approximately $10 increase in the summer period. So on the water side, we're looking at a 6% rate adjustment for 23, 24, and 2025. The rates vary between 4.6% and 9% over those years. Next slide. The impact to the customer is approximately $4, going from $55. This is on a customer who uses approximately 7,000 gallons a month, $55 to $58 a month. With that, I'll turn it over to the operations staff. Steve Green.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Green, Executive Director of Water Operations. Tonight, I'm presenting on why the water needs to have an increase. We've not had an increase since 2013. That's 10 years. Increase in operation and maintenance expenses have gone up. We need to replace aging infrastructure, which is our main leaks and stuff like that. We also need to improve our system reliability. We also need to build our cash reserves and meet our financial guidelines, and then increase costs in our capital projects and materials and labor increases. So major economical indices have the ENR building costs index has increased 41% over 10 years.
Mr. Green, I would remind everyone to not discuss at the time for two reasons. One is so the people here can hear the presentations. And so when they're recording this, it has a clear recording without a bunch of static and other talking. So if you refrain from talking, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so again, the ENR is a building cost index that's put out throughout the United States. And over the last 10 years, it's increased by 41%. Our contractor bid price has increased 70% in these 10 years since our last increase. Our average pipe material has increased 290% in the last 10 years. Our chemical costs on average is 80% up, and our operation expense since 23 is up 23%. The next slide shows our chemical cost, how much they've gone up over the last 10 years. Chlorine 241%. We use a lot of this to treat what we use to treat the water, clean the water, to send it out there. And it's a huge cost for us. Next slide, couple of slides, I'm going to talk about material costs. As I talked earlier about our pipe, our PVC pipe has gone up by 6 inch on the 6-inch by 336%. And on the 8-inch side is 345%. Our ductile iron pipe has gone up between 245 up to as much as 239 on the 12-inch side. Our costs continue to rise in our material. It seems we almost see at least every few months an increase in price. These are materials that are jobs that we do daily, our distribution crews do. And so repairing a 4-inch main, just the material cost alone, in 2018 was $385. It's now over $1,000, over 2 times the cost. That's what we're paying for material. The same goes for installing valves. 2 times has increased over 2 times the amount. Our material cost for services, that's where we're going out replacing services from the main to the meter box to first control valve. That's more than doubled in price when we replace these galvanized lines. So the same goes for fire hydrants, installing new fire hydrants to protect the community. They've more than doubled in price in the last few years. Like I said, and that goes on for about everything we do has increased big time. So we also have our capital projects. These are our annual ongoing CIP projects that we must do. So these are a lot to do with the water distribution system where we have to make improvements. There could be sewer jobs or city jobs that we got to make improvements to. That's $9.6 million over the next 3 years. We'll figure that we'll be spending. Fire hydrants and valve replacement, $4 million. Our water services, which is our galvanized services that we replace, is about 2.3. Our water meters that we replaced as they fell is about 2.3. And then our work equipment and automobiles and tools is about 2.7 million. And then our water facilities and equipment improvements, it's about 2.1 that we'll be spending out in our distribution system. Our major capital projects are 7 million gallon reservoir that we have going on in the Argentine system. This will improve the reliability in the Argentine and the direct system. This is a 7 million gallon project that's currently started. And this is a great, we've been needing this for about 10 years, but we finally got some financing and able to move on with this project. The others is pump controls at our 55th Street pumping station. We got to replace the electrical switchgear and the variable frequency drives at the parallel station. We also need to replace, we talked about water main replacement. Bill talked about that. Well, we need to replace these aging mains. We got a lot of main leaks that cause us to shut the water off to make these repairs. So this will give improved water supply and fire protection. The other one we talked about was the Nearman water treatment generator. So it's roughly a $5 million project that we will do, and it will improve the reliability during power outages at the treatment plant. We also have some transmission main improvements we must make. The 12th Street and Kansas Avenue, we have a 24-inch water main that goes underneath the river. Well, over the years, the river has eroded the soil, and so it is now that it is dangerous that we need to replace it. So we are currently working on the plans to have this replaced, and they will bore a hole and pull a new water main underneath the river. And then a 24-inch transmission line in parallel system to help improve reliability in the system as it's grown out. The other big project that we have for transmission is the 18th Street. KDOT is replacing the bridge start replacing it in 2025. We have a 24-inch water main on it that has to be replaced. So these are all major transmission lines that will be replaced. Thank you.
envelope. My name is Darren McNew. I'm the Executive Director of our Electric Operations Group. I'll be going through a lot of the same type of material that Steve just went through, talking about some of our challenges and upcoming capital projects on the electric operation side. So this is just some data over the kind of cost increases that we've been experiencing since 2018 for all our various materials. The left side of the slide here kind of goes over some of our typical materials for like I'm sorry, can you guys not hear me? I apologize. So the left side of the screen goes over some cost increases that we've seen since 2018 on typical overhead materials for our overhead electric service. You can see pole mount transformers up 100%, which means those costs have doubled. Wood poles 56%, concrete poles 49%, wire and conductor 61%, insulators 66%, and cross arms 101%. Same thing on the right side. Those are typical materials for like an underground electric service. You see pad mount transformers are up 175%, conduit 349%, and then rebar 88, and enclosures 58. So we've had a lot of challenges with prices, dramatically increasing, doubling, tripling. And in addition to the cost increases, we're also faced with supply chain issues, being able to get that material in a timely fashion. So having to change how we purchase material and how we store it and buy things in advance. Items that we could typically get in 2 months are now 2 years out for us to order. Next slide, please. Just some cost numbers on a typical underground electric service for a house, a residential customer. In 2018, the cost to put that service in was about $815. Today, that same service, is $1,455. So almost doubled for the very same material. On the underground, it's another underground service for like an apartment complex type service. So 2018, we're looking a little over $1,600. 2023 numbers, that's almost $3,500. So over double for the very same material, very same equipment we're putting in to serve our customers. This is a breakdown of our capital budget over the next 5 years. This is kind of what Lori already presented. To run through it again real quick, this is how we're allocating some funds over the next 5 years to improve our system. $15.8 million our transmission, $20.5 million for substations, $52.8 million for our overhead distribution system, $14.5 million for our underground system, and then general construction, $7.3 million, electric transformers, $14.5 million, and meters, $5 million. So on the next slide here, I'll go through some of the key projects for each of the areas. And what we're trying to do with all these projects is, improve reliability to our customers and the resiliency of our system. So a couple of the key projects on our transmission side is the Nearman-Quindaro 161 kV transmission line for $2.9 million. That's a transmission line we're going to build that will actually improve reliability for all of our substations and transmission system on the whole eastern side of the county. So it'll be a big benefit there. That also helps meet some, system reliability requirements that are mandated to us federally by North American Electric Liability Commission. So it's a twofold project. Have another $3.65 million dedicated just to replacing our aging transmission infrastructure and increasing reliability. Again, that's what is driving all of these projects, is taking care of that aging infrastructure issue. And our overhead distribution system, we have $13 million allocated to overhead distribution improvement and automation. And what we're doing with those is constructing additional distribution feeder circuit ties, installing distribution automation equipment, and addressing some of our worst performing circuits in the system. Again, improve reliability, and with the additional circuit ties and equipment to be able to restore power faster when there is an outage. Our pole inspection replacement project is a big capital initiative for us at almost $17 million. And for that, we are going around our entire system, on an annual basis, inspecting and treating all of our wood poles in the system, trying to prolong the life of those assets with the treatment. and also inspecting the poles and replacing them when they failed, which is being more proactive. And which, helps with reliability and just the safety of our public, getting those, old poles out of the system. And then the Piper feeder project for 13.3 million. That is for construction of new feeders on the western side of the county to meet some of the economic development and new businesses and new construction going on there. For the underground distribution piece, for 11.4 million, we are replacing our aging underground infrastructure with these projects, constructing some additional circuit ties, installing switches and other equipment. And again, this is all the same kind of objective. We're looking to replace our aging infrastructure to improve reliability and improve the speed at which we can get our lights back on for our customers. I think I might actually skipped over a substation slide there. Rob, can you back up? I apologize. So our substation projects, the Mill Street substation, for that, we're doing that in conjunction with a facility expansion at one of our customer locations. And that allows us to retire 2 of our older aging 69 kV substations that require a lot of maintenance, and a lot of money and time invested. The Speaker substation, which is a facility located near the I-70 and 635 interchange, serves all the customers in that area. That's another project to replace that substation and reconfigure our transmission system in that area. And that's going to improve reliability for not only those customers, but the surrounding customers because of the reconfiguration of the system we're doing there. And then the Call West substation expansion, which we're installing some equipment to provide additional redundancy for our customers and meet demand of some new economic development going on in the area of that facility. I think that is everything.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Brendel, Executive Director of Electric Production. I'm responsible for the generating assets BPU owns and representative for BPU for our joint ownership of the Dogwood facility. So I won't bore you with the inflationary pressures that everybody else has spoken to previously, so I won't bore you with that, but the cost of doing business has gone up. So what do we try to do is we try to manage those costs. So staffing, we try to right size the generating assets. So we're doing the right things at the right time, actually expanding the efforts to streamline the workflow process and educate our employees to do more with less. So besides this year, we expect to stay right around that 85 to 89 level and not increase. On the expense side this year, we're a little bit higher than the 30 million we're projecting out to 2027. And this is mainly due to some very large projects, mainly the turbine generator valve work. That's usually on a 6-year cycle, and that happened this year. And also generator re-wedge work on the generator that improves the life cycle of that asset. Next slide, please. So from a major capital expense side over the next to 2027, we're really in a maintenance mode for all the environmental equipment that we have. So catalyst layer replacements, pulse jet fabric filter replacements, cold nozzle replacements this year. I spoke to that already. And heater fiber replacement, we try to recover all those cycle losses that we find over time due to wear and tear. And so that heater fiber replacement is there in 2024. MCC load center replacement. So part of my task is to make sure our employees are safe. So these MCC replacements are actually upgraded MCCs for arc flash protection and worker protection and safety in general. For the CT side of our operating asset or generating assets, really we're just seeing the normal maintenance cycle, but control system upgrades are our big spend. Just like your Apple iPhone, the next version always comes out. So these are 15, 20-year-old control systems that we need to upgrade. And this is a reliability issue. These generating assets are peaking units, and during Uri and Elliott, these units were very valuable to the utility over time. And also a little bit of dogwood expense. That's good, Robert. Thank you. So what are we going to do? We're going to continue to right size staffing. We constantly evaluate where the opportunities are. We want to maintain operating costs going forward. Capital improvements are really related, as I stated earlier, to maintaining compliance and safety and replacing obsolete equipment. Future electric generation that is being studied and evaluated. I imagine that study will get in full swing as soon as we're done with this work pressure here on the rate case. But I think that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Glenn. My name is Andrew Ferris. I am the Director of Financial Planning here at BPU. In terms of electric supply, a lot has been going on within SPP, NERC, those type of things. And market changes have been plentiful at SPP. We see increased market activities, both in terms of charge types as well as type and location of generation. That's directly impacted the flow of power throughout the system. We've also seen greater market volatility due to these changes. And so we expect that volatility to continue moving forward. On the supply portfolio side, nearly 50% of our electric supply today comes from green or renewable sources. About 60% of our retail sales today come from those same carbon-free green sources. From a load perspective, we do expect modest load growth, as you've seen earlier. We do expect it to be relatively slow over the time period that we're talking between 2023 and 2027. But generally speaking, we do expect some modest load growth. Next slide, please. One of the changes that got mentioned earlier is the energy rate component. The energy rate component is a rider meant to provide for the recovery of the utility's power supply costs. These costs are predominantly made up of fuel, purchase power, reagents, regional transmission costs, those type of activities. As part of some of these purchase power agreements, the BPU pays a capacity charge associated with that resource. Currently, 2.6 million of those capacity payments are recovered through the base rate. Staff is recommending to reallocate an additional 2 million in capacity payments to the base rate. This will act as a reduction of $2 million annually into the ERC costs. Staff is also recommending, due to volatility within the fuel and purchase power costs over the past few years, staff is recommending establishing a reserve fund to help cover up to 120 days of ERC costs. And this will be a gradual process that we will recover over the next between now and 2027. Next slide, please. The Green Rider is another change that we're hoping for. The Green Rider is really a program designed to provide large customers the ability to source up to 100% of their annual load with renewable energy. These programs have really spurred over the last 5-6 years across the country. And this program is expected to have a net neutral impact on all non-participant entities. So whether that be the residential class or those other C&I customers that do not participate. Staff will work closely with these potential participants to determine potential renewable projects that most closely match the goals of those participating, including cost, quantity, timing, type, project length, etc. And the goal really is to provide a mechanism to allow those large customers that have sustainability goals, the flexibility and the means to meet those goals in a cost-effective manner. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the goal really is to improve the debt coverage, to maintain adequate cash reserves, to support capital improvements and maintenance throughout the service territory, maintaining competitive rates throughout the study period while maintaining reliability. And if you need any additional information, there is information on the bpu.com website. If you look at the main page, it is directly on the main page. Right in the center of the screen, so you can't miss it if you want to find additional information on the website. And on that note, that's all I have.
Mr. Moore, I'd like now to call on the BPU consulting engineers. First, Mr. Craig Brown to talk about the electric rate study and recommendations, and then Anna White to talk about the water rate study and recommendations.
Thank you, Kathy. Again, my name is Craig Brown. I work at 1898 & Co., which if you're not familiar, that's the consulting division of Burns and McDonnell Engineering, based in Kansas City, Missouri. We're known as 1898 & Co. because we just celebrated our 125th anniversary this year. So long-established engineering firm based in Kansas City, and I work on the consulting side of that business. I've been in financial consulting about 23 years. The last 20 of it I've focused on utility rate and financial consulting. I've worked with the BPU before, but I also work across the country as well. So bring a little bit of national perspective and a lot of local knowledge to this study. And I think a lot of the purpose of this study is to kind of, the BPU staff has explained the dollars and what the budgets are. Goal of my presentation is more explain how we consolidate this all into a rate model and make recommended changes. So if you go to the next slide, just to talk about the rate study process. So when we do a rate study, it's really a 3-step process. And a lot of what staff's talked about so far is the financial planning side. And so they've done a load forecast, forecast of revenue under existing rates. They have their forecast of budgets. And what we help consolidate that all into a 5-year financial forecast of operations. And then within that, we also work with them on the financial planning to say, we understood, there was a need to build up cash reserves. Part of the $50 million bond issuances is to free up some of that cash and buy debt financing projects and building out a plan like that. But what that tells us is what's the overall need in revenue adjustment for each of the utilities. Step 2 is really when we get to more of the engineering side of this, and that's the cost of service study. Cost of service is more about taking one snapshot test year of the cost, and usually it's the rate, whatever time the rates are going in place, and going through an allocation process to take all of those costs and spread them to the customer class to determine what's the equitable share for the residential classes, the commercial classes, the industrial classes. And we follow kind of an industry standard methodology to do that I'm going to explain a little bit more. But what that's going to tell us is of that overall rate increase, how should that be spread amongst the classes and which classes are over or under recovering their relative cost of service. And from that next step, we'll move on to rate design. Once we know how much we're going to recover from each class, we'll define pricing mechanisms to either expand on your current rate structure or add new rate structures to recover the full revenue requirement. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we're going to talk about the 5-year financial forecast. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into a lot of the same detail that some of the other staff has done. I did want to show just the total revenue forecast to point out a couple of things. One, as you can see, as has been presented, it's quite flat under existing rates, but there's different rate components as well. So the blue section is what's known as base rate revenue, and that's really what's recovered in the BPU's operating budget, all the capital projects, all the salaries and employees. The orange piece is the ERC, or that's that variable fuel charge you pay that directly is a direct pass-through of the truly variable costs for fuel and purchase power. And that can fluctuate a lot from year to year, and that updates on a quarterly basis. And then above that, you pay a pilot to the UG, and then there's some other revenue sources as well. Point being, so really what this presentation is about is the base rate side. And so we're going to focus on that. The ERC is already a mechanism in place. We're focusing on that piece in the blue. Next slide, please. So this kind of consolidates the 5-year financial forecast. So you can see at the top, you have your major sources of revenue, your base rate revenue, fuel and ERC revenue. There's also an environmental surcharge that was put in place years ago that pays the debt service on any environmentally mandated projects. There's nothing new on that this year, so that's just staying steady. And then some other revenue sources, which is mostly pilot. And so you've got about a revenue from $288 million, and it stays fairly flat through the study period. And then on the expense side, we've talked about the fuel and purchase power expenses recovered to the ERC, total operating expenses, debt service, and then other expenditures and transfers, things like how much you spend on cash on those capital projects as opposed to debt. As been presented by Lori and others, you can see that the annual difference between revenue and expenses shown by the revenue surplus or deficiency goes negative quickly and expands throughout the end of the study period as well. So those key financial metrics that we target, being days cash on hand and debt service coverage, are going to dwindle throughout the study period below the policy targets. So the mechanisms we're proposing to bring the BPU back to where they're meeting their key financial policies is an increase on the base rate side of 2.5%, both this year proposed to be starting in July 1st, 2023, and then the next year, 1 year later in July 1st, 2024, a 2.5% increase on the base rate side. And then the other mechanism of this has been mentioned is the creation of an ERC reserve fund. So we've talked about multiple times about the need to have 120 days cash on hand. Well, a big piece of what drives that is the fuel and purchase power side. And we've always had a mechanism where anytime your cash dwindles, it has to be built back up through base rates. So basically what we're proposing this year is to have 120 days of fuel and purchase power in reserve on the recovered and managed through the ERC, and then maintaining 120 days still on the operating side, where you're not increasing base rates to cover the fuel reserve that's covered somewhere else. By doing this, we're going to try to gradually build into this. We don't want to do it all at once because 120 days of the fuel and purchase power cost is about $27 million. So we're going to slowly build into this over 5 years and do that by every quarter, there'll be about an additional 1.5 million added to the ERC cost to build up to that point. And just as a side note, if this piece of the proposal is not approved, that 27 million over 5 years would have to be added to the base rate increase. So it's kind of it has to come from somewhere. We think this is the most reasonable and equitable way to recover it. So that's why we've proposed that. Next slide. And this repeats I think you've seen this table a couple times, the financial metrics under proposed rates. With this, you hit the 120-day metric by 2025. So again, we're still trying to gradually build to where they need to be. And with that increase, you maintain your debt service coverage throughout the whole study period. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of the 5-year financial forecast and the rate mechanisms proposed with that. Next, I'm going to talk about cost of service, and this is more the engineering side of it. If we can go to the next slide. So the cost of service phase is also kind of a 3-step process. So we start with a test year revenue requirement. In this case, it was the 2024 budget year, the planned expenses for next year. And we do that on a cash basis. So all the revenue requirements is what we've talked about. Just on the base rate side. So this does not include fuel, but O&M expense, administrative and general expense, debt service payments, cash finance capital, things like that. All the things you budget for in a year. And we go through a process of functionalization, classification, and allocation. Functionalization is really what the costs are used for. And actually some of the BP staff, they're kind of functionalized in what they do. So there's a production department. There's the people that are in charge of the generation side. There's a transmission system. That's the high voltage electric lines on the big towers that move from generation to the substations. The distribution system is another function. That's basically the lines that run around the city that you see most often on the poles. And then there's a customer aspect. There's customer service and billing functions. And so we'll take all the costs and put them into one of those buckets. The next step is classification. This is really one of the key drivers in cost allocation because we have to think through, and there's industry manuals that guide us on this, but determining what drives these costs and what changes, causes one of these costs to change. And if a cost is classified as energy related, that means some increase in kilowatt hour sales is going to make this cost change. If something is demand related, that means some measure of peak demand is going to drive a change in that cost. And customer sided cost is something that the more customers you get on the system is going to drive an increase in customer costs. And finally, we kind of, once we have those, the functionalized and classified costs kind of bucketed together, that's when we allocate those to the customer classes. So we'll allocate to your various classes of residential, small and medium general service, the larger general service and power, and the lighting classes. And once we have that, we kind of call that a fully unbundled cost of service. And then we go through and analyzing it. And we both look at, we'll compare the allocated cost of service for each class to the revenue that they currently create with their rates and see if they're over or under recovering their cost of service. And then we'll also look at unit costs. And that's really taking, for example, all the customer related costs divided by the number of customer bills in that residential class. That kind of gives you an indication what the cost-based customer charge should be. So you kind of notice like the energy demand and customer is also how rates are built. You have energy charges, customer charges, and demand charges. And that kind of gives us a feedback on to make decisions on what we do with rate design in the next step. If you go into the report itself, there's a whole lot more tables that show this process. I didn't think it was really appropriate for tonight, so we're going to jump to the punchline. Because it does get quite technical. So to break this down for you, the way to interpret this is without looking at all the detail, I'd focus on the middle line that says indicated percent adjustment. So with the top, we have the allocated cost of service or revenue requirement compared to the revenue under current rates, shows the class deficiency. And then we calculate the rate that would be indicated to get each class fully up to cost of service. And we kind of look at that compared to the 2.5% system average. As you'll see, the cost of service study itself shows that the residential class based on the study would get an 11.4% increase. Now, we don't use this as a direct guide. No one's going to recommend that for the residential class, but it guides direction on where we go. Some of the larger classes, such as medium and large general, are over recovering their cost of service, so they would show the need for a rate decrease. Likewise, we're not going to decrease their rates. It's going to be more blended. The way we use cost of service results is to make directional changes to get things closer to cost of service. And that's what we use to drive some of the decision-making we have going forward. But kind of the takeaway for this is, based on the cost of service study, the residential class is under recovering their costs, and some of the larger classes are over recovering their cost. And we use this as we go to the next step in rate design. Next slide, please. So, based on the cost of service study, we work through our process.
Can I get asked that you not talk during the presentations? If you give the speakers the same consideration you like to have when you make your public comments, that'd be appreciated. I don't think it's going to wrap up before any children's bedtimes.
Well, you have older people. They just say, this is your, what you're looking at is your community. What's that way? Imagine me to respect your community. Please.
We'll move on.
Thank you, Your Honor. So what this shows is the recommended changes for each class based on the cost of service study. So as we looked on the previous slide, the takeaway was residential should be slightly more than the system average. The larger classes should be less. So we've made small incremental changes around that 2.5% base rate change to give residential a little bit more and the commercial a little bit less. And then some of the school district and some of the lighting classes are getting right at the system average of 2.5%. So this fits our goal of making, we don't want to recommend a big extreme change for residential, but we want to make directional change that consider the cost of service results. Okay. Next slide. This is really kind of just a rate design primer on what drives rate design decisions. And a lot of this is the cost in operating a utility are fixed or variable, and the majority of the costs are very fixed. So all your investment in generation, transmission, distribution, and customer costs, those are all fixed, meaning they don't change with kilowatt hour usage. However, variable cost is your fuel and purchase power, like is recovered in the ERC. Some volumetric charges, there's some O&M related to generation that's variable, and some environmental costs. Next slide. So we use that and understanding those fixed and variable costs as, we talked about earlier how customer demand and energy costs and classifications drive those rate components. So we use that as a guideline to understand what costs should be recovered through what components, and trying to work rate design towards better alignment with the cost of service study. Next slide, please. Now, this creates issues with the way most people do electric rates. So if you look on the left side, typical utility system costs, as we talked about, you've got variable energy, but you also have fixed demand for production, transmission, and distribution, and fixed customer costs. Now, if you look at your electric bill, it's got a customer charge, and the rest is on a variable kilowatt hour charge. So there's a misalignment between what's fixed and what's variable, and how costs are incurred by the BPU and how it's recovered from customers. So that just kind of factors in as we make decisions going forward to try to get a little bit better alignment there. Next slide. So as we make our rate design guidelines, and basically what we're trying to accomplish is, as we talked about, making directional changes based on cost of service. We capped the rate increase for any one particular class at 150% of the system average. And we're working towards getting more costs recovered in fixed charges, and improve that, going to improve revenue stability and also reflect the cost causation principles that we studied. Next slide. Key changes we're making is merging the residential and electric heating rates. This has been talked about. It's going to look more like the current electric heating class. Again, we've modified the ERC rider to allow the recovery of the ERC reserve fund and the creation of a green rider for customers that want to procure energy with renewable attributes. I won't go into a ton of detail on this. This is all in the report, but this shows the actual recommended rates for each rate class. So we've got small, like $2 increments on the customer charge for residential. And by having that, it keeps the energy charge increase to a minimal amount. On the small general service class, again, small incremental increases to the customer charge based on the cost of service study. And in general, we're putting more of the increases in the demand charge than we are on the energy charge, because basically all your variable costs are already recovered in the ERC, and everything that's recovered in base rates really does not vary with kilowatt hour sales. Next slide. Again, this is all in the report and available. Same method. So this is the medium, the large general, and the large power classes. And again, most of the increases are in the energy charge. I think some of the energy charges actually even go down in this. But again, getting those fixed charges up to where they should be based on the cost of service study, and less of an emphasis on the energy rate. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, so why are these rate adjustments recommended? We've talked about the increase it's been a while since the last increase, 5 years. There's significant inflationary pressures we've looked at. Cash reserves are well below where they should be, and we need to build that back up to 120 days to continue to be able to issue debt affordably. And it's going to be, the main thing is being able to maintain a reliable system and being able to continue to invest in your system and operate it to keep the lights on. Yes, yes. Okay, and with this, I will pass it over to Anna White from Black and Veatch.
Okay, I am the last speaker. I don't know if that's good or bad. A lot of the information that I was going to present tonight has already been said. So to the extent that I can skip over some of the slides, I will. I understand that it's been a long night. Okay. My name's Anna White. I'm a principal consultant with Black and Veatch. Black and Veatch is a engineering firm here in Kansas City, located in Overland Park. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Black and Veatch has a management consulting division. We have about 170 professionals that provide consulting services in all of the different areas listed there. On to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit of the project understanding, rate study best practices, and then talk about the process that we used. I'll go very high level on that, and then the results. So go to the next slide. So there's basically 3 steps to doing one of these studies, as you've heard. The first step is to really evaluate how much revenue is needed. So what are the operating and the capital requirements? The second step is how do we allocate those requirements to your customer classes? The third step is then how do we recover the revenue in order to fund those requirements? Go on to the next step. Next slide. And go on to the next slide. So I do a lot of cost of service rate studies here within the Kansas City Metro, as well as kind of across the country. These are some of the best practices that our group sees with regards to doing water rate studies. So defining the financial performance measurements. We've heard a lot about that this evening so far, talking about operating reserves, talking about debt service coverage, but identifying what those targets are. The second step then is to develop a multi-year financial plan that will put together the plan in order for the utility to meet those metrics. The third step is to then perform a cost of service study every 3 to 5 years. You don't generally need to do that year to year because cost of service doesn't change dramatically from one year to the next, but every 3 to 5 years, you should look at cost of service, and that means looking at your rate design. Fourth then is to make sure that you do establish and implement rate structures that will provide for appropriate cost recovery from all of your customers. Okay, I can go on to the next slide. So the focus of a cost of service study is to match the costs of providing services to each of the individual customer classes, such as residential, commercial, industrial, and then design the rates to equitably recover those costs. So this is generally done using this 3-step process. Yep. So these are kind of the 3 steps that Craig just talked us through as well. So identifying the revenue requirements, doing the cost of service analysis, that's where we allocate those to the customer classes. And then the third step is designing that rate structure in order to recover those costs. So this is just a little bit more detail about that process. As you can see, kind of what I would just want to point out here is that it's a very orderly and systematic process. There is a manual, an industry manual that lays out this process. The American Water Works Association has a manual called the M1 manual. This is all laid out in that document. So we follow that process as we do when we do a cost of service rate study. Next slide. So a little bit more information about financial planning. So the objective is to make sure that we have identified all of the appropriate costs that need to be recovered from the customers. We're talking about the operating costs, capital cost, as well as meeting all the financial metrics. So making sure that there's a fully funded operating reserve in case there's an unexpected increase in operating expenses or an unexpected decrease in revenue. That's what that operating reserve is for. It's kind of like your savings account that you have. If there's an issue with your income or your expenses, you've got a cushion there to go back on. There's also a capital reserve requirement. That's also in case capital costs come in higher than expected. There's a little cushion there in order to help fund those. Some of the things that we want to take into consideration when we put together the financial plan is revenue generation. So really what we're talking about there is what kind of things can impact the amount of water revenue that the utility recovers. The big one there is water usage. That's what drives the revenue. So we'll talk about water usage on the next slide. Some of the other things though that we want to take into account is revenue requirements, factors that impact the revenue requirements. We've talked a lot about inflation. That's the big one, inflation with regards to the operating costs and increase in capital costs as well. Appropriateness of the operating and the capital reserve. So again, just making sure that what we have in those 2 reserves is sufficient in order to provide that cushion necessary going forward. And then making sure that all the financial targets can be achieved. On to the next slide. So this is a graphic of water consumption. I think it's kind of interesting because it kind of shows pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think we're still kind of getting a good understanding and feel for what post-COVID looks like. But you can see that kind of leading up to COVID, we're on a nice steady incline in water usage. When COVID hit in 2020, you can see there's a significant decrease. And since then, it's never really rebounded. It's kind of stable now, it's kind of flat, but it's not really to the pre-COVID level. So what we've projected going forward for water consumption is just the continuation of the current level, which at the 22 current level. So one of the things that the water utility has experienced is a decrease in water consumption. There is, I'm sorry, one other thing on that slide. As been mentioned from previous speakers, there's also some changes in the wholesale customer conditions. Bonner Springs building the plant. Suburban Water has wells in place. In order to draw water from the wells, their plan is to put in place more wells. So they're going to draw more water from the wells, take less water from the BPU. And then to kind of offset that, those Tonganoxie. So Tonganoxie just this year has the Hills Pet Products facility that went online. So that's going to increase the amount of water that Tonganoxie will pull from the BPU. Okay, next slide. So this is just a summary of the total revenue requirements compared to revenue under existing rates and revenue under proposed rates. So you can see the bars, it's the buildup of the operating costs, debt service. There is outstanding debt service for loans that were issued for previous capital projects, as well as cash financing of capital. So if you compare the bars to the dotted line, that's revenue under existing rates. So you can see as we go out to 2027, there's a gap. The bars are higher than the dotted line. The solid line is the revenue under the proposed rates. So this is where we bring the two together. Okay, we bring the revenue and the expenses together to close that gap. And what we're proposing, you can see there's annual increases of 6% for each year during the study period. Next slide. Okay, and then this is what the fund balance looks like, again, with and without the revenue increases. So this is the operating reserve. The guideline is 60 days of O&M. The target is 100 days. So what you can see, if we look at 2022, we're starting off at a pretty good level, but without any revenue increases. The dotted line shows that in 23, we dropped below 100. In 24, we dropped below 60 days. In 25, it's negative. What the solid yellow line shows is that with the revenue increases, we're pulling it down just a little bit. We're going to use up some of those funds to pay for some of the expenses in order to keep the revenue increases down as much as we can. But we're pulling it down to that 100-day level, and then we're holding it there going forward. Okay, next slide. So the cost of service methodology, there's really two key outputs that we get from this kind of complicated process. One is the allocated cost by customer class. We need to recognize that there's differences within the customer classes. There's a difference between the retail customers, which is the residential, commercial, industrial customers, and the wholesale customers being Bonner Springs, Tonganoxie, Suburban. There's a difference in the level of service and the type of service that they receive. So we need to acknowledge that and recognize that as we go through the cost of service. The second key output is that what the cost of service gives us is the unit rates that go into building the rate schedule. So there's two components of the water rate. There's the customer charge. That's the flat rate that you pay based on your meter size. And then there's the volume charge for how much water you use. What comes out of the cost of service analysis is what those unit costs should be for each of those two rate components. Okay, next slide. So this just shows it just a little bit more. So at the top there, it's kind of shaded in green. It might be a little bit hard to see. But this is a graphic of a very high level graphic of the BPU's water system. So what's shown in green is the part of the system that's dependent on volume. So when I say that, what I mean is the treatment plant. How is the treatment plant sized? It's based on how much water it needs to produce. The pump stations, how are the pump stations sized and how is it determined how many are needed? It's based on the amount of water that's going to go through them. Storage tanks, how do we know how many storage tanks we need and the size? It's based on the amount of water. So when we're looking at the system and identifying, is this a volume cost or is this a fixed cost? It depends on what part of the system is. So anything that's in green, the plant, the pumping, the storage, all of the pipe, that's all volume related. The only thing that's not volume related is the activities associated with reading the meter, sending the bill, collecting the revenue, providing customer service. So those are the fixed costs, and that's what makes up the customer portion of the bill. Okay, next slide. So then we get to rate design. So when we get to rate design, we want to take into account what cost of service indicated in terms of allocation of costs to the different customer classes and the allocation of costs to the different rate components. But there's other things that we want to consider as well, and those are listed up here. Equitability. If we did the cost of service analysis, then the results are equitable. That's the whole point of doing that middle step. But we also want to consider revenue stability. We don't want to make any changes to the rate structure, like say move a lot more of the cost to the volume piece and reduce the amount of revenue recovered from the customer charge, because that's going to affect revenue stability. The industry standard is for utility to generate about 25% of revenue from the fixed fee. For the BPU, you're currently generating about 30%. So you're right there. So we don't want to make any changes to the rate structure that's going to impact that. Sending appropriate price signals, recognizing usage patterns, that all has to do with the rate structure itself. We're not proposing any changes to the rate structure. We're not really doing anything that's going to change how that revenue is recovered in that sense. We can go on to the next slide. So here's what we're proposing. For retail customers, 94% of the retail customers have a 5/8 inch meter. Cost of service is indicated no increase in the customer charge for a 5/8 inch meter. However, you might or might not be aware of this. So the rate structure for water, there's the customer charge, and then there's the minimum charge. So each meter has a required minimum amount of usage. So if you do not use the amount of usage, the minimum amount of usage for that meter, you are still charged for it. Okay. So while the fixed monthly charge is showing no increase, there will be a small increase in that fixed charge in that volume component that's included in the minimum charge. As you can see though here, for a 5/8 meter, it'd be approximately a 0.2% increase. So very minimal. For fire protection, again, cost of service is indicating no increase. For wholesale customers, and this is just in the monthly customer charge, wholesale customers the same. Cost of service indicated no increase. So kind of the question is probably, well, if there's no increases there, where are they? It's in the volume charge. If you think back to the discussion that Steve talked about with regards to the capital projects, he talked about the plant, he talked about the pipe, all of that. If you think back to the graphic I had, that was all in the green section. That's all volume related. So that's where the costs are increasing, and that's where you see the increase in the rates. Okay. So approximately an 8.2% annual increase in the volume charge. No change in the rate structure. We did evaluate or look at some alternative rate structures. We talked about the pros and cons. The BPU decided there really wasn't any reason in order to change the rate structure at this point, so we're not proposing any changes. The wholesale customers would see a 6% annual increase in their volume charge. Next slide. So one of the goals of cost of service is to recover as close to 100% of the allocated cost for each customer class. So what this graphic is just showing, the green line there is 100%. What we're showing is that for most of the classes, residential, commercial, industrial, schools, we are right there. We're right at 100%. There are two that aren't. One is the private fire protection, that's over 100%. That's because that the existing fire protection rates are recovering more revenue than cost of service indicates. There's two options. One is to reduce those rates. The other is just to leave them as they are, recover that extra revenue. Over time, cost of service will catch up. The latter is what the BPU has chosen to do, is just not raise the fire protection, not decrease the fire protection charges, just keep them as is. And then the other one is the wholesale. So the wholesale customers, their increase is equivalent to the across the board increase of 6%. So that's why you see just a little bit of under recovery there. Next slide. So typical bills. So what I'm showing here, this is just the customer charge with no water usage. And so this is a comparison for BPU's existing and proposed rates with other communities here just in the Kansas City metro. The BPU is towards the top. We do this analysis every time we do a rate study, and BPU is always kind of on the upper half. That's just how it is. We don't have the information in order to explain, you know, why is the BPU $20 and why is Topeka 15? I can't answer that question. There's a lot of different variables that could go into that. But this is just showing that the difference, the increase here, just in the customer charge with no usage from the existing to the proposed. Next. And then this is just a little more detail. So about 66%, I think that note on the side there is about 66% of residential customers inside the city, and I think 74% or 66 outside, 74% inside use less than 700 cubic feet. So what I'm showing here is some typical bills for 6, 8, and 1000 cubic feet. But what you can see if you look at the 6 cubic feet on the left, the blue is the existing, and then the orange on the right is by 2025. So what you can see is going from existing to 2025, it's about $6.50 increase. So on average, it's about $2 a month each year increase for the typical residential customer. Okay, and then one more slide, I think. So why are these rate increases recommended? Water consumption decreased after COVID. It's steady now, but it's not as high as it was. Operation and maintenance expenses have increased significantly due to inflation and other factors. CIP needs to be implemented in order to maintain safety and reliability of the system. And then finally, we want to make sure that we meet our target metrics, target financial metrics. We meet the days cash and we meet the coverage. And again, to reiterate what others have said, the existing rates have been in place for 10 years. And during that time, costs have increased, consumption is down, and we need the funds for the capital. Okay. And that's all I have.
All right, we're going to start our Q&A period right now. So what I need to do, I'm going to take about a 5-minute break or less. Everybody who has filled out a question card, let me know, and I'm going to swing by and pick them all up so we can get that rolling. And then I'm also going to check how many questions we have on the chat, and then we'll start with the question and answer period, and then there'll be public comments afterwards. The hearing officer will call for that. So take a 5-minute break. I'm going to run real quick. If you've got a question card, hold it up. Let me know so I can grab it, please. Thank you. Question cards on the side over here, right over here.
And I want to remind you that this is your chance to ask questions, not during your public comments.
Stephen's over here. What's the name? Any more questions from the audience on the car? Cars. It's still rolling out, on all of them. Right.
Call for questions on target, please. Let's go.
There you have it. Part of it.
All right, folks, we're gonna get going with the Q&A. I know everybody wants to get home. So let's get rolling on here. If after this, we're going to have an open comment section. So please, and we want to get rolling with that. So if you want to comment, make sure you're signed up on the sheet. If you haven't done so, please do so. Okay, thank you. Now, there were some questions that we were asked that had to do with unified government taxes, had to do with situations that had nothing to do with utility. So those are things that you're going to have to ask your commissioners on. And just, we're here to address issues pertaining to your electric and water utility. We have no control over the taxes and all that, and I hope you understand that. Okay. There was a couple other questions that went pretty deep into salaries and things like that, and we do not have that information readily available. So that's something whoever asked that question can follow up afterwards. You can email publicaffairs@bpu.com. We'll go from there. Let's get going with the Q&A. I know you're ready to get home. So we have a lot of questions. First of all, Bill Johnson, General Manager, take it away, Bill.
Thank you, David. All right, I'll take it. Hey, David, after I'm finished or sometime as I'm speaking, if you can work with the lady here, she has a whole list of questions. First question I got is need to separate bills at UG and BPU. So there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of customers have come to our board meeting making this request. There is some more ongoing conversations between the BPU and the unified government. I have to let it rest there because there's been no final decisions made. And there are some upcoming meetings in July to talk about this exact topic. So until there's more to report, I'll just have to leave that there. But the conversation is taking place. How much money could BPU save if we were to shut down the coal power plant? I think our analysis showed that we would not be saving money. In fact, I think we could show data to where it would probably cost us more money to do that, because some of the things that we're already doing with our green energy portfolio and the things that is being tested out and proven out in the market. Why are we building out west when a grocery store is needed in this community? I would say that BPU works with the unified government on an ongoing basis on economic development. Personally, I would like to see more economic development spread across the entire city and county, not just out west. But I don't want to say that we shouldn't be building out west. We should continue the momentum that we've started out there. We should also look in some of the other areas in this community where we need to make strategic investments in those parts of town. During the pandemic, was BPU allocated money to help? Not really. I mean, there was money that came into the unified government. I think through the pandemic. Lori, we were given 250,000 out of, what is it, 80 million or somewhere thereabout. So yes, that was the only money that was allocated to BPU from any of these relief funds. Why is BPU the only electric company here? It feels like it's a monopoly. Yes, well, throughout all states, majority of electric utilities do operate in a defined service area. So there's only a few areas in this country to where the utilities have been deregulated and customers actually have a choice. But the majority, by far, operate the same way BPU does. Evergy has a defined service area. Every other utility in the state of Kansas has a defined service area. Are you attempting to capture more revenue with a smaller population base? As our population base shrinks, that puts pressure on all of us, all of our residents, all of our businesses. What I would like to see is our economic development goes towards increasing our population of citizens. And that'll take a lot of work between not just BPU. I mean, this is a question that should be targeted toward the unified government as well. So I think we all want to see our city grow. How much revenue could be changed from how much revenue could be captured by changing the existing administrative structure to the city manager in charge of utilities? Most utilities, public power utilities, are managed the way BPU is. At least everybody our size in the upper tier of American Public Power. Has there been serious consideration to selling the BPU and merging with a larger scale to get more competitive system, economies of scale? So, well, I think we can demonstrate where our cost is already cheaper than most of those other large utilities. So, and we can also demonstrate where to where most of our investment back in this community on a per capita basis exceed what those large investor-owned utilities are currently doing. They are for-profit, BPU is not. Since BPU is being the monopoly, what about having multiple water and electric companies? I think I've answered that. We have a defined service area, just like most other utilities. Most utilities have a defined service area that they serve. So ours is, we serve electricity to the citizens of Kansas City, Kansas. And we sell water to the citizens of Kansas City, Kansas, the city of Edwardsville, and we have wholesale customers outside of Wyandotte County. But those are defined service areas to where we're answered your question, okay? So those are.
Other services here. So we'll have not just one person trying to tell us what they do, we'll have options.
Okay. again, those are service areas are defined by those service areas are defined across every jurisdiction in the state of Kansas. Is Wyandotte County the county whose I can't read this, is Wyandotte County whose rates are increasing? Did I get that right? Okay. No, there's other utilities that have had rate increases prior to us. And there's other utilities that have rate increases that are planned and also before either their board or before the KCC or any other people that approve those rates. What does Ukraine have to do with residents in Wyandotte County? Not much. I know that I mentioned that earlier, but what goes on, this is a kind of a global economy, not so much economy that's controlled strictly and solely by what goes on in the United States or in the state of Kansas. Things that happen overseas affect energy prices here. Things that happen overseas really impacts our national economy because the world is integrated, because we trade and sell and exchange services and products with the rest of the world. So those are things that go beyond what I can even begin to explain here. I mean, this is a global economy. We buy and sell to many other countries. Is BPU recovering from COVID? No, I've stated that earlier. Why is Bill Johnson get a huge raise? And during COVID, my salary is based on us. So we have professional people that look at all of BPU salaries and do a market study, and our salaries are compared against the other utilities within the industry, whether it's electric and water, and we're very competitive with all those other utilities. What programs are currently implemented to attract more residential customers? Again, we're working on the economic development front with the unified government, with Wyandotte Economic Development Council to try to attract not only businesses, but residents here as well. So I think this is okay. What?
Could we please keep the questions limited to what we're reading on the cards?
Yes, we stated.
And that's why I gave him this.
Well, Mr. Johnson did ask him to look at your question, so I'll give him that opportunity. But for the rest of you, we've said numerous times, if you have questions, put them on a card, we would address them. That opportunity now is passed. So let's move on to what we have.
So who's next? Who's next?
Other BPU personnel and our consultants will answer other questions. We assign those to the.
Oh, we can do that again, the consultants. No, you need to, let the people speak.
The question
Okay,
I
let's-
received,
Go ahead.
Ma'am, people had.
Oh, we need to proceed. Rebuke you out of there.
Okay,
And I'm taking my grandkids.
thank you.
I insist on this, and they don't agree with it. Lady. I grandbaby. It's a big issue.
Ma'am,
That y'all have on us, it's just like us working a job. Why can't we get a refund like we do with our taxes?
I understand. Okay, if you. If you're gonna disrupt the hearing, you gotta leave. It's pretty simple. Either participate, but don't disrupt. If you're gonna do disrupt, leave, because you're not helping anybody. We have people who are here to listen to it and gather information and express their opinion. If you can't allow them to do that, you should leave.
Questions have been put on pause. You got to listen to them.
Have a response after
No, you had
You will get a chance. Those who signed up will get a chance to speak after the question and answer. But that's not for questions. That's an opportunity to speak after the question and answers. I have 14 people who signed up.
So we're moving on to the next set of questions.
Have the increased projections included a continual transition to a green energy portfolio? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, since 2005, we've adjusted our portfolio greatly. Nearly 50% of all our generation today comes from green energy sources. About 60% of our retail sales come from green energy sources, and we are proposing a green energy rider going forward for those customers as well. So we have a community solar project if anybody wanted to participate in that. So that's out there as well. So we do have green energy sources and it's continuing to grow. But
Okay, next question is, how does the attrition of customers over a 10-year period affect the cost of utilities if the increased overhead costs continue to increase? It's a very simple. If customers decline, there's fewer people to spread those costs over. So costs are going to go up for the remaining people, which is why economic development is so important for this community, to get more communities and businesses that bring jobs and more residents. That's how really you keep rates down, is by growing your system. There's a follow-up question that talks about, will the increasing cost cause people to leave compared to other and go to places where it's cheaper? All I can tell you is that if you look at the surrounding utilities, every single utility around you is also raising rates. So this is not a unique concept to them. If you look at the rate dockets in Kansas and the other surrounding municipals in Kansas, all utilities are also raising rates right now.
All right, my question is kind of related to water, and it says, are the metal prices, are they overpriced? For our ductile iron pipe and our hydrants, our valves, and all of our fittings, they are metal. So when we bid all of our projects out, our projects get bid out for material and for contract work. So everything we do has been bid out, where the contractors, the vendors will send in their costs. We take the lowest bids, and that's how we move on. So we directly we don't have metals in here for us, but our vendors, their metals, yes, they have increased.
Question, what is the cost of a family of 4 monthly water and electric? So it depends. A lot of factors go into what a family of 4's cost will be. It's, what type of home do they have? What's the architecture? Is it insulated? What kind of equipment, air conditioning is in the home, and so forth. So I took this question because I got a family of 4. My water bill is consistently around $55 a month, and my electric bill in the winter periods around $125. So that's $180 for electric and water in the wintertime. In the summertime, my electric bill goes to about $250 to $300, so we're looking at, $250 to $300 total with electric and water. Yes.
We don't see bills that look like that every year. We got less than 1,000 square feet. How many square?
Okay, so my question was, have you consulted Topeka and other cities on how to lower this bill? The answer is no. The reason why I specifically showed an example of, that it's difficult to explain why the BPU typical bill is higher than Topeka, because it's hard to answer. There's a lot of things that could impact that. Topeka could have much higher growth rates than Kansas City, Kansas does. That impacts that. Maybe Topeka's system is newer than the BPUs in terms of making improvements and to the system. That could lower the costs. Maybe Topeka received some federal funding to help funds get started a lot of some of their large capital projects that the BPU has not received. So there's a lot of different, things that can be different between utilities. So it's very hard to explain why the rates are different from one community to another.
So one of the questions I had was, what are the rates supposed to do? So our rates are supposed to cover our operating and maintenance expenses, as well as our capital plan, and to recover our debt payment that we have on our bonds. One is, how much are the top 10 salaries listed? I don't have that information with me right now, but we can provide that later. The other two questions are similar, is how many Wyandotte County residents did you involve in your study? And then why has BPU hired an outside staffing? Why can't the money be used in Wyandotte County? So we did do a request for a proposal for our electric and water cost of service, and Black and Beach and 1898 were two of the bidders in there, and so we did go through a formal RFP process. It was included the whole service territory. I mean, it was posted, it was advertised.
Data, like how many residents gave their input on the study?
It was based on our cost and everything. I mean, we didn't have a community effort in developing our cost of service study. This was more about the RFP process. Oh. No, we didn't have a community input.
That
into our
is the
study.
purpose of this public hearing, invite the residents to participate, and provide information.
The question is, what is the amount put in pension fund for Bill Johnson and Lori Austin? Under Kansas law, the individual identifiable pension information is not a public record, and so we can't release that.
So I've got a list of questions here. I would say the majority of these should go to the unified government. Okay, I'm gonna read through the ones that pertain to BPU, but I just wanted to make note a point. Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge that, make sure that we're in agreement, okay? So for BPU. Not all of them, but I'll go over what I see as BPU.
That's on the first page.
The bottom of the first page.
The bonds, they're on the first page, they're circled. All the ones that are BPU specific, those questions are circled.
Okay, so you got a lot of property taxes, you have other cyber threats and things like that, but, okay.
Do you see where I'm talking about the bond, the unified government issue?
Yes, that's the unified government question, so.
But it pertains to BPU.
Okay. All right, so let me come back to that one then, okay? Okay. So is this proposed increase, is this proposed increase apply to industries and businesses LLCs? Yes. I think we outlined that earlier in the presentation of what the allocation of rates will be by customer class, by residential, by business, by large commercial, small commercial, industrial, schools, et cetera. So I think we've already answered that. What did you do with those funds? I'm assuming money that we bring in.
Bond that you all gave, that was part of the question. How was the bond money that you, unified government gave, how was it distributed within the PPP system? Who the bond was specifically for PPP?
Okay, so the unified government does not, they approve our bonds, okay, okay, all right, okay. So Lori covered most of that in her testimony. We do go out for long-term debt, and we do go out and sell municipal bonds. And then we also tap into the state of Kansas revolving loan fund. These are 30, 40, 50-year assets. And it would be unfair for this community today to have to pay the full cost of all that, knowing that there's going to be generations of people using that, and all that can't fall on the back of the people that are currently sitting here. So that cost needs to get spread out over the life of those assets. How come you did not have tools in place when it came to engineering to foresee the infrastructure? I guess the aging infrastructure question that I talked to earlier. So, yes.
Have the forecast to forecast the debt down low. How come you don't employ engineers?
So we have very, very capable engineers, but this is a question that wraps around every utility that I could think of. We all have aging infrastructure. And again, you can't replace that at such a pace to where it overburdens the citizens at the time and try to pay for all that up front. So we have 20-year master plans on both electric and water that lays out a schedule for replacing assets, and we follow those plans. Now, they are updated periodically, but that cost is spread out over the life of those assets as well. So when those asset replacements are all prioritized based on the 20-year plan, we break those down into 5-year plans within our budget, and then we try our best to address it that way. It still comes down to whether we have the adequate revenue to address those situations when we need to. Yeah, I'm going by the questions. If you turn in questions, we've already, okay. If you knew you needed infrastructure, why didn't you go ahead and plan? We do plan for that every year. Okay. If you can forecast, if we can forecast that, how come you did not employ engineers to do the same? We do have electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, civil engineers that work every day at taking a look at our utility needs and helping us do all the forecasting for maintaining. We do both. We do both. We do both, just like every other utility that I can think of. With water piping in the northeast areas, how can you bridge those materials that need to be complete?
Water.
Yes.
They still have clay piping. And I know that because when Google is doing the installation, I was driving around one area asking Google questions.
Right.
And that's when I knew and found out that you still got clay pipes.
Right.
So how do you fit those, the galvanized pipes or the new pipes?
So what?
You got the water hydrant from 34th Street back.
So why don't I answer it this way? Okay, so east of 635 is where the majority of our aging infrastructure is for water mains and water pipes. Okay, And for at least a decade or longer, BPU has been putting more of an emphasis on addressing things east of 635. Most of our budgets have gone towards replacing that infrastructure. The $10 million grant that we just received is all targeted towards that part of town. And we will continue to focus on the areas where our infrastructure is the oldest. That's where we have the most leaks. That's where we have the most problems. Even on the electric side, we've made some huge commitments of upgrading our electric system east of 635, and we'll continue to do that. That's where the oldest part of our city is. That's where the oldest part of our system is. Okay. Have you utilized more than one county for chemicals?
Yeah, have you utilized more than one company?
One company, okay. Steve talked about the bidding process we went through earlier, so, you know, by policy, we go out and bid all of our materials, all of our services over a certain dollar amount. So those are competitive bids. We get the lowest, best qualified bids that we can get before we spend our public dollars on anything we do. Are you using our own employees or are those jobs contracted out? It's a combination of both. So we have the majority of the work that the utility performs is done by BPU employees, but we do have contractors too. When you still have clay pipes in the Northeast, I think I already addressed that. Steve, are you familiar with?
Yeah, so clay pipes you're talking about the sewer systems and that's the unified government oversees that. Our material is we have ductile iron pipe, we have cast iron pipe, we have galvanized pipe, and we have plastic pipe. But anything to do with clay tile, that's the unified government water pollution sewers.
Thank you. Are you using employees for replacement or contractors? We're doing a combination of both. Just repeat of what I said. Rate study forecast. Why were installation of metal poles in the Northeast 10th Street areas instead of using wood poles? Okay. Well, so we made a shift towards those because in the high traffic areas, those have proven to be a better option than wooden poles for reliability purposes. And also some of our distribution design, we're able to bring multiple circuits down the public right of way with some of the other changes we made on our distribution. But for the poles itself, there's a lot of cars that hit poles every year in Wyandotte County, and those wooden poles break and they create outages way more than we want to see. So in the high traffic areas and some of the other areas where we have really high critical loads, we're trying to change our philosophy around our distribution system, and we're putting in more concrete poles that can last longer and stand up to all the elements in the environment. When is the shutdown of the payment in lieu of tax program? That's a question for the unified government, not for BPU. As of July 25th, 592 million utility system improvement bond. When is the? Okay. Lori, I'll bring you back up here. Help me with this one, because I don't have anything in front of me to
I'm assuming you're looking at our overall debt profile. Is that? So it is out till, I think, 2054, I believe, is our debt structure.
I think I've answered the utility, the revenue bonds, and I think that's it.
Fire hydrant, That have no connection to us.
That question was not presented, so
It's on there. But you have about 5 hydrants in this area that are not actually connected to any systems. You get a lot in the northeast area.
Okay. Okay. can you ask the question again, please?
You have a lot of, when Google was doing their installation for the Google Fiber. And a lot of them, I drove around, okay? And just look at the water hydrants. So you got a lot of water hydrants in the northeast area, almost to 34th Street. You got some that are not, you got the hydrant, but there's no water connection, nothing is connected.
Well, the connections are all underground. You're not gonna see,
That doesn't.
yeah. So every hydrant is tested every year. And if it doesn't work, there's a work order made. The fire department goes through, checks them, we go through and check them, and then we get work orders and then we repair them or replace them. But every hydrant is connected to a water main. Yes.
I've seen several with my own eyes. Is there a study or is it something we can access? Do you have transparency on the results that they checked off on?
Yes.
I'd like to have a copy of that. For the neighborhood of Parkwood.
Though that, this concludes all the questions that's been presented to us. Thank you.
Now we're going to start the public comment portion of this public hearing. I have, I believe, 14 people who signed up. I'm going to call your names. I want to apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. I have 2 sheets, so I'm going to go back and forth. Given the hour, I would ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning, and it will move to the next person. If you okay, and there's 2 people online and you have their names? Yes. Please. Okay, the first name is Sarah Lynch. Can you step up to the podium, ma'am? You have 3 minutes.
Hi. It gets me every time. Hi, my name is Sarah Lynch. I'm a resident of Wyandotte County. Also a member of Community Conscience Action Network. First, I want to say my question did not get answered on the cards, and that was, did the rates that have been projected in all the charts and all the flow charts and materials that have been presented tonight, did any of that include a transition into greener energy? Because we're aware of the Green Rider program, but is BPU making any commitments to further their green energy portfolio? Or is it just projected to stay as is?
Okay, ma'am, there's no
Because-
one's going to answer your questions at this point in
Well,
time.
and it should at least be out there since I have the 3 minutes.
Oh, no, you can talk for 3 minutes. I just want to let you know no one's going to answer your questions at this point. You can ask the questions at some other time to get it answered, or come back tomorrow and submit a question.
So this isn't coming out of my 3 minutes, right? Just the one, you and me?
I hit you pause.
Okay, I
Still-
appreciate that.
4 seconds.
I appreciate that.
Okay, you're back on the clock.
Okay. I'll try to meet the. So. If those projections are not factoring in a commitment to greener energy, then that means is BPU then either planning to keep the rates as is regardless of transitioning into greener energy? Or are they just not coming to not doing anything further than what's already been done? And we acknowledge that there's 48% of the portfolio in green energy. That was in the newsletter, and bravo on that. But we need more action on that. And by doing so, we will lower the costs for BPU and for the residents. These raising of rates as well, I'd like to add, should also reject a lowering on the flat fees that keep the bills going up. I understand that costs of service and costs of operation and everything else that was presented tonight do happen, you know. A gallon of milk raises 10 cents and that makes a huge dent on everyone's budget. But what does that have to do with the price of milk? Well, when you take a BPU bill for
You have
energy
30 seconds.
into account, the fees outweigh what we actually use. Our bill, my family's bills personally have been over $400, and over half of those at times have been fees alone. And that's saying nothing about the pilot. We understand you guys just assess it, but the UG controls it. But we need an adjustment on those fees if we're going to raise the rates.
Time is up. Thank you.
And thank you.
Donzer Jones Wilk. Okay, you understand your question won't be answered, but you can ask it.
Oh, okay. This is number one. Okay. My question is, I pay $17.95 per month for waste services, for waste management to come up and pick up my trash. Okay? And that's $17.95 every month. That's on my BPU bill. For the last 3 weeks, I've had to contact Waste Management, and they referred me to a department in City Hall to discuss me not having trash pickup, and all my neighbors on 16th Street that pay, that's on their bills, they don't get their trash picked up. So I put my trash out on Tuesday nights, and I'm up usually at 6 o'clock, 6:30, when the trash men are coming on my patio or either watering my orchard, and they bypass my street. So that means that forces me to get the trash, put it on the trunk of my car, and then go 3 blocks up to my brother's house to put my trash so it can be picked up. And that's a problem. So if I'm going to continue to pay for no services, why are they still collecting that on my monthly BPO bill? I'm not getting the services that I paid for. And I speak for my neighbors because I have a lot of disabled neighbors in my neighborhood. I have a lot of senior citizens, and I have a lot of single mothers. And we are experiencing this problem, and it's an issue. If we gotta go to another location to pick up our trash, then everyone on 16th Street need to have that bill completely taken off their monthly BPU bill.
Thomas Gordon. Thomas Gordon. He's online. Okay. We have Thomas Gordon on the chat. No, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, he is.
Hello,
Mr. Gordon, you have 3 minutes. Your time's starting now.
okay, I'm glad that you guys figured out I was online, thank you. My comment is pretty simple, is that we need to be, BPU needs to be more aggressive in offering incentives to the residential customers, just as they're enthusiastic about offering incentives to commercial businesses and wholesalers. So I feel as BPU would be more selective and accountable for third-party service providers, such as the people that come in to offer services for making your home more energy efficient, or providing services for your underground water selections. We will have better participation and better service from these third-party service providers. One of the things that seems to happen is that when you have a problem with one of the third-party service providers, there's no one that's held accountable for it. And if it's something where that BPU has underwritten the cost of it, that's put on your bill, there's no recourse against the third service providers, and it becomes like kick the can down the road. When you have these type of activities, that discourages people from wanting to move to the BPU service areas. But if we could provide better incentives and more accountability, I believe that we can increase the amount of customers in the BPU area, which will help to spread the cost of the maintenance that's necessary to have an efficient BPU service to provide a quality water and electrical service. This is not just a unified government bill activity. This is an activity that needs to work hand in hand with the BPU service providers. And I believe when we do those things, then we don't have to worry about such a dramatic increase in our utility services. And I'd like to offer the remainder of my time to the next person that's speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Angela Valente Locke.
Thank you, board members, for not putting me out so I can be heard. And just to let y'all know, one of you I voted for, so I hope y'all hear us out. I've sat and listened to a lot of the reasons they are saying we need an increase. I see that $476,144 was given in raises between 7 individuals in BPU. We're struggling down here. They want to raise our bills. Personally, I work for the state of Kansas. I make peanuts, but I do it for my community. My clients can barely pay their BPU bills. I have to help them out of the state funding. So with that said, the $476,144 that were issued in raises from 2020 to 2021 can go towards whatever they need us to put on our bill. Thank you.
Adri Matlock.
Good evening. My name is Adri Matlock. I'm a KCK resident, and I live in a home that's 110 years old. And it, like many of the homes in my community, is not airtight. It leaves me worried about air pollution as well as extremely high costs for electricity. When I listen to these studies that are presented by both BPU staff and outside consultants, I hear huge gaps in what you are factoring in to make the case you should increase the rates. First, where was the information about the federal funding that is pouring down through the EPA in particular in order to convert to green energy. And that could be utilized for community engagement. That could be utilized to improve our infrastructure. Where was that in factoring in these different rates and costs of things? Where was it? Because there's billions of dollars coming through the EPA. What else did I not hear? There was no Wyandotte County residents engaged in the process of creating a rate case for how much money that we should pay on our bills. You can sit in a room and do the math. Those numbers are relevant. Sure, it's relevant how much things cost to create, to install, to produce, to pay people. But if you never sit face to face with anyone from our community, your study is ethically negligent. You cannot.
Let's listen.
I appreciate the applause, y'all. It's simply ethically negligent. There's no reason to do a study about us without including us. And it is also incomplete. It is inaccurate. There is a huge flow of funds we could be drawing from, and yet instead you insist on squeezing blood from a stone. Wyandotte County residents do not need to be the source of the revenue gap that needs to be covered. There is federal funding that could be used to leverage the push towards green energy, to engage our community in leading these changes. And it needs to happen today. Vote no on the rate increase.
Sharon? I haven't started yet.
Okay,
Now you started.
okay. Well, first of all, we're all frustrated because of this bill. Now, I've sitting in those meetings, those conference meetings on the phone, and I hear customers are from Wyandotte County, they're complaining, about the issue. But you guys are sweeping it under the rug as it is going out one ear, coming out the other. You all don't care. Basically, my questions were asked, why not have a multiple choices of other electric and water companies? Why not that? Okay, my second question is, what's the motive? What's the real motive? You sweeping stuff around the rug, under the rug. What's the real motive? What's the real purpose? Stop giving us the runaround. And what's the real purpose of what you're doing in Wyandotte County? Yeah, I used to have, before I moved back here to Wyandotte County, I was in Johnson County and I had Evergy. They did not charge me like BPU, $500 a connection fee, plus what I'm paying, what I had to pay currently. This makes no sense. I'm on an income just like everybody else. Everybody's trying to survive. And you all don't care. And my concern is for everybody, but especially for the elderly, disabled, which you all obviously don't care. So what's the motive? Because it's going to come out. Whether you try to hide it or not, it's going to come out eventually. And the Lord don't like ugly. So you'll get yours.
Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown here? Is Jackie Brown online? Okay. Hazel Davis. Okay, I'm going back and forth between the two sheets. This name I'm sorry, I can't read, is Wally Yeager. Okay, you're next.
Good afternoon. It's just so much right now. Right now, I want to address basically how our bills are being done. And it's continued to raise on the residential level and not the commercial level. This is a major issue. You cannot bring more residents into a community if they can't afford to pay the utilities. You don't want to build, that's why they're going to small and tiny houses. I am a developer. I am watching how people are moving to certain areas and going down to smaller houses so they can afford utilities. This is a major issue for Wyandotte County. We are not working with economic development programs in order to build and lower our taxes. Our taxes just got raised 28%. So if we got 28% on our homes, on top of the fact with no cap, like Missouri has a 5% cap a year. You have fees on here that are just automatically ridiculous. Now I'm sitting up here looking at where we get the T-bones. I remember they had $314,000 that they did not pay BPU. It was 700. Okay. Well, they did not pay BPU. We ended up having to pay these rates. So when you do your numbers, you're not looking into the fact that we are the ones carrying the weight. Every time. We don't look at the fact that we have General Motors, Kellogg's, and the fiberglass company who don't pay taxes at all on their property. They have a 25-year tax abatement, but they have the lowest rate when it comes to their utilities. If you're going to raise some rates, let's come on. You want to get this money? I'm about getting money all day long. I want Bill's money. Okay, so what we need to do is basically, Lord, raise these taxes. I mean, this money for the actual commercial.
30 seconds.
And I'm not even going to talk about the pilot tax. And I hope you realize that where the pilot tax is. The moratorium, that's a joke, because of the payment assistance program is a total joke. Because if I'm on disability and I have to pay if I have to pay $200 added to my monthly bill that I can't pay, that I only bring in $900 a month, that's not going to be able to help me.
Your time is up. Thank you. Your time is up.
Can I take over the people that didn't speak because we needed that money there?
No.
Okay.
Have a seat. Thank you. L. Warner. L. Warner. That's no.
Yeah, they didn't call him. I'm L. Warner too. I'm L. Warner too.
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
L. Warner, I've enabled your ability to speak. Please hit *6 on your phone or hit the mute in the bottom left hand of your Zoom window to enable your ability to speak.
Okay, why don't we call someone else? We'll get back to her. Is Louise online?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Is this Louise?
It is.
Louise, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. First of all, there was a question asked during the question and answer session that you all weren't able to answer in regards to the 10 top salaries. And I can give that, but I want to go a little deeper. As I was sitting here listening to you all talk, I was getting sick to my stomach. I heard you all talk about pre-COVID and how it, took you guys money away and went into a deficit kind of. I want to just bring a little light to that. Pre-COVID, Mr. Johnson was making $266,000. Post-COVID, in 2022, $429,000, making an overage of $233,914 plus pension and benefits. Lori Austin was making in pre-COVID, $279,711. After COVID, $318,579, $38,868 difference. Mr. Ash was making $219,180 pre-COVID. After COVID, $324,591. Janetta Henson went from $139,276 to over $166,000. When I totaled up 6 different people at random, there was $544,034 that was made off of COVID. I don't consider that a deficit. If you lowered every family's bill $50, you could provide that to 10,881 families, over 17% of who you serve. So let's talk real numbers. I don't want to hear about what this costs or that costs. We have people making minimum wage, $7.25 an hour from 2019, and are still making $7.25 an hour today. Working 40 hours a week, they make $290 gross per week. If there are 2 parents, that's $580 a week gross. If they both work 2 full-time jobs, that's $1,160. We're not talking about the taxes that come out of that. We're not talking about how they're going to feed their kids, how they're going to keep their lights on, how they're going to keep their water on, how they're going to keep them families healthy, how they're going to keep them safe. And then you talk about you want to add on $2 a month, $2, they can't afford what they've got. I'm one of those
30
people.
seconds.
And during Kira, people were still cut off and you got the money. You did it to my family twice. You cannot continue to put us at risk in our safety. Do not vote for this increase. If you vote for this increase, I want every resident of KCK to contact me at Community Conscience Action Network. I'm on Facebook, and we will rally and we will protest. We cannot have the top 6 people.
Ma'am, your time is
making
up.
this kind of money. Just 1 second, please.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay, but we go ahead and do this. Not acceptable.
Okay, Rachel Russell, online. Rachel Russell online.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have
Good.
3 minutes.
Okay. Rachel Russell, Wyandotte County resident. Thank you all. I know the hour is getting late, so I appreciate you still hanging in there. More than 40% of our community lives at or below the poverty rate. Based on the most recent CHA Community Health Assessment completed by our local health department, nearly 1/3 of our community is housing cost burden. Nearly 49% of those within the assessment said they were worried or stressed about being able to pay their household bills, including rent and utilities. I think we are all aware that price hikes such as these, as well as sales tax increases, that rate hikes and sales tax increases, while minimal in nature, these increases disproportionately impact our most vulnerable communities, who frankly are already struggling to pay current bills with the additional fees and piling on the current bills. It seems to be very irresponsible of this BPU to provide numerous pay increases to administration during a budget cycle without taking account to deficits within the operation and infrastructure needs. Then proceed to tax its customers and ratepayers for usage fees not received. It seems very unaligned. Make it make sense. I strongly encourage you to consider other avenues of revenue and justification to address the current funding gap, including proactively researching and pursuing federal dollars to address these widespread infrastructure issues. BPU ratepayers need reduced bills, more access to federal resources that support aging homes, and a public utility entity that better supports those that live in this county. What ratepayers don't need is an increased bill. While you make arguments that surrounding areas see similar increases, those that leave our community say BPU is a huge part of it. Those that live in this community are unhappy. There must be an urgency to improve ratepayer satisfaction, including reopening the lobby and providing in-person
30 seconds.
service, and consider innovative ways to better serve ratepayers in this community, including authentic and real community engagement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I am asking and urging you to vote no on this rate increase. Thank you.
Okay, can we get L. Warner, try L. Warner again? Okay, thank you. Cece Mance.
Hello, everybody. Anyway, so CC Make, and I live here in Wyandotte County. So I just got a couple of little flashcards on. So everybody needs to go and look over the budget, whichever ones they have on their website right now, because if you read those numbers, you'll be really questioning why they're asking about this raise. Your accountant said I want to talk about that publication that he testified about. He said he put in the Kansas City Star, which is not even in circulation anymore for real. And then the Wyandotte Echo, which is a paper that most people didn't even know was still in circulation and is only on the website. But this paper is usually for real estate agents, businessmen, and lawyers. So who were they publicizing to? Not the people, because it would have been on 459, 41, 62, and Channel 19. Oh, not to mention UGTV. The pilot fee that I heard that they were talking about fixing poles. Well, the pilot fee, according to our UG over there, is used for infrastructure, pavement, and those light poles. So again, why are you asking for raises for that? Mr. Bill Johnson mentioned the cost of supplies, materials, and all that. Well, a few months ago, I think it was in January or February, I came up here and I let them know that it was 3 employees that got caught stealing copper on camera, and they didn't even lose their job for that because they were friends with Bill Johnson and Jeremy Ash. So when you're asking us for a raise, are you adding in the stolen copper and stuff from your employees? Are we being asked to pay for those things? And if so, I respectfully decline. When you're considering raising our bills, are you considering taking a pay cut? Because y'all are the only ones that are not struggling. Y'all are the only ones not struggling. I guarantee you don't have to worry about your light bill if you have one. Because I don't think none of y'all pay a light bill. I really don't. Because if y'all did, y'all be up here complaining right along with us.
Brock Williams. Brock Williams. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I want to take y'all back. My mind goes places. So I was thinking about 9/11. This is what this whole situation is like. When 9/11, 2 pilots crashed into a building. After that, security went up. There was a policeman on every plane. There was all kind of infrastructure happening. It seemed like an illusion, like they wanted to fool us with all this other stuff going on. But why didn't they just check the pilots? All the pilots that flew planes, but they was doing everything else. COVID hits. Everybody raised rates. There was gas hacking or whatever you call it, where the gas just goes way up. You gonna get sick and my gas goes up. My toilet papers are out of stock and they get raised up. Everything went up. It's all a game. So it's like a three card Monty. Where's the queen? Where's the queen? And that's what it feels like with BPU. Like they fooling us with all this other, showing us all these numbers. We're not accountants. We don't know all the jargon, the MCC and the CLU and the XX. We don't care, but that $2 and that $10 and that $5 and that 75 cents and that $3 gonna add up. And then the young lady said something before COVID, they'd make 100 grand. After COVID, 200 grand. How do you get $100,000 raise? Most people get like a $200 raise. $50 raise, 75-cent raise. How you act? So when they talk about don't raise the rates, don't do it, it don't smell right. Take it from your own pockets, the board or whoever's making these big dollars, and help the community out. Help Your Honor, I know you got $50. Help your community out. Thank you.
Renee Van Ross.
Good evening. We're all tired. We're exhausted. We have been sitting here since 7 o'clock and we listened for 2 hours to a bunch of mumbo jumbo that most of us didn't even understand. I'm sure they probably thought we needed to see that so that we could understand why a raise was needed. But I'm also sure they could have cut that down. Also, my thoughts, the entire board, other than Senator Haley and Rose Mulvaney Henry, needs to be voted out. They don't care about us. And we need to be talking to our commissioners so that they can vote this down. We pay enough. Wyandotte County is one of the poorest counties in the state. Why do they keep doing this to us? Because they know they can. Because we have no other choice. And this rate increase, I'm sure 100%, it's already a done deal.
Okay, the last person on the list, Ty Gorman. I don't know if that's because you're Ty Gorman or because you're the last person.
Last one. I'm Ty Gorman. I live in Northeast KCK. I'm the Sierra Club representative for Kansas and Oklahoma. And first of all, y'all, some people stole my energy, but having a public hearing start at 7 p.m. and then have 2 hours of that and then have people speak last, that is crazy. And that's crazy. I mean, you schedule, you do something like this by saying, okay, there's a lot of reasons why things cost a lot of money. And here's what we're trying to do to help you. Here's what we need to know from you in order to improve those plans to help you. So, explaining all the details of energy rate making and water is inappropriate. All right, so moving on, I'll mention the coal plant first. I heard that it was more expensive to close it down than to keep it open. It costs more than any other single asset. And Sierra Club did a really extensive analysis of what those costs are, how to deal with those, how to draw that down. So that'll be tomorrow. I won't talk about that anymore. I want to talk about, there'll be half an hour on that tomorrow. So tune in for that. The coal plant, that when I go talk to people, they're worried about also their kids' asthma, the life expectancy rate in Wyandotte, the pollution problems that we obviously have here. The fact that Johnson counties live so much longer than us. There's all this pollution here, and we are the only ones with a coal plant this close to us in Kansas. Wonder why that is. So that's, let's get back to the expense of it though. Rates don't, the cost of service that you described on rates, you don't have to stick to that as policymakers to give. They said 30 to 25% normal over here. They said that from Black and Veatch, 30% is what we have. Commissioners in Minnesota and Washington, sure, but also in Missouri and Texas have said on the record, and others, there are policy reasons not to match all these fixed costs exactly like this so that it costs the lowest income people the most. Energy burden is highest here in Wyandotte County, higher than anywhere in Kansas. We pay a higher percent of our income for our utilities than anywhere else in Kansas because of these fixed charges. Because of and you know, if you're going to raise the rates, you better lower the bills for the lowest income people here. And there's no reason to stick to these econometric, confusing analyses that and to pretend like they're written in stone when the board and the staff have the power to lower costs overall on the bills for folks who are struggling and stop disconnections for the elderly, for disabled folks, for these dangerous things. It's getting hot. You got to figure out the assistance and stop putting people in danger. Thank you.
Time is up. Okay, that concludes the public comment portion of this hearing. Is there any board member that'd like to make any comments? You don't have to. Okay. Is there anyone from the, on the behalf of the interviewer like to make a comment?
Teresa Woody, I am counsel for the Sierra Club in this rate hearing matter, this rate matter. And we will have a full presentation tomorrow in the technical session. So I invite you all to come and hear what we have to say. I appreciate everybody staying this late. It's been a long, long evening, and I sure appreciate everybody. And it's been amazing to hear what you all have to say. What Sierra Club wants to focus on in this particular rate paying case is closing down the Neumann plant, the coal plant. And we know that the BPU needs to be proactive in figuring out the most economic way to get that plant shut down as quickly as possible. Neumann's costs exceed its value to the taxpayers every year. It's continuing to operate Neumann. Neumann actually causes increased risk, and those risks continue to grow, just as Ty was talking about, the environmental risk to everybody who lives here in the community who lives close to that plant. This is an ideal time for the BPU to be looking at alternative energy sources. There is federal money available from the infrastructure bill, the law now. And this is the ideal time to be looking to replace things like coal with sustainable, clean, cheaper energy. So we really think that this is a time for that to happen. Finally, the BPU needs to figure into its rate scheme an end to these long-term contracts that it has with must-take clauses in the coal industry. This doesn't benefit the folks in Wyandotte County. It really does not benefit them, and it doesn't benefit them in getting rates. The most of the generation from the coal plant goes into the southern power pool, and doesn't help the residents here in Wyandotte County. So we think BPU should avoid long-term contracts, and it should avoid self-commitment into the Southwest power pool. and really focus on trying to get Nearman shut down as quickly and as economically as possible, and making use of the funds that are available for sustainable, cleaner, cheaper energy. Please, please join us tomorrow for the technical presentation. Thank you so much. I have no idea.
Hearing starts at 9 o'clock.
I
Alright.
would bet it will be 11:30 or noon or after, if I had to bet based on the presentation time here this morning. If it's, yeah, that's my understanding. This presentation will be repeated tomorrow, so it'll be probably after 11 for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member of BPU staff have any closing comments? No?
Just wanted to say thank you all for coming and actually, I was going to try to answer the question that was just asked. I think that we probably won't get till the technical portion until at least 11:30 tomorrow, because we will do a repeat of the presentation for those who are not able to be here this evening, followed by a short break, followed by question and answer period, followed by public comments. And then we'll take a short break and get to the technical portion. At that point in time, BPU will formally introduce its evidence. We won't read things again. We'll just offer it into evidence. That'll take a little while. And then it will be time for the intervener's presentation. So my guess is we're probably looking at something closer to noon. Thank you all for coming this evening. Yes. I beg your pardon. Yes, the Zoom will also be open tomorrow. So yes, you can watch it then. It's on the BPU website.